All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Joaquin Esquivel. I'm chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. Today is Tuesday, July 19th. It is 9:32, and I would like to call this meeting to order. I'll begin by introducing my fellow board colleagues with me today. Joining me today is Vice Chair Doreen Diadamo and Board Member Nicole Morgan. Joining us as well is our Executive Director, Eileen Sobek, our two Chief Deputies, Eric Oppenheimer and Jonathan Bishop, our Chief Counsel, Michael Loffer. Our Clerk of the Board is Janine Townsend, and assisting her is Courtney, Tyler, and Margie Argel. This meeting is being webcast and recorded, and it is a hybrid meeting. I want to start at the top here as well and acknowledge that with the recent budget that was passed, so too was passed a waiver of Bagley-Keene laws, which require an in-person quorum for meetings of the board and boards in the state. And so we do have a quorum of the board today, but one of our board members here is participating remotely. And so this board meeting is a hybrid meeting. There is both an online and in-person component. If you are online, you're viewing us one of two ways. Either you are viewing the web stream on Cali PA's website or the YouTube live stream, or if you plan to comment on any item today on the agenda, you should be on the Zoom platform. If you are planning on commenting on something, you are not on the platform, there are instructions at the top of today's agenda on how to fill out a form and receive a link to get onto the Zoom platform. If you're having any challenges with that, please do email the clerk of the board at comment-letters@waterboards.ca.gov, and we'll help you get onto the platform. Once you are on the Zoom platform, your cameras will be off, you will be on mute until it is your turn to speak on the item that you've indicated you wish to speak on. For those of you here in the room, welcome, good morning. We're here in Sacramento in the Cali PA building. Quickly observe the exits. In case of emergency, we will file out calmly from those exits, gather in Cesar Chavez Park, and await further instruction. As well, hear those in the room, please turn off any noise-making devices you may have. If you plan on commenting on an item here and you are in the room, there is a sign-up form for to be able to get onto the queue right here at the side of the room, and please do sign up if you wish to speak on any item. With that, we can now move on to our public forum. We hold public forum here at the beginning of every board meeting as an opportunity for anyone to address the board on an item not agendaed before the board. And currently, I believe we have about five public forum commenters. Each commenter will have about 5 minutes. That will add about 30 minutes here to the start of the meeting, but if folks can be brief and succinct, it can help us get to our agenda. I'd like to first call up Corinne Bell, who will be followed by Teresa Olson, and then Jen Engstrom.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. We can. Good morning.
Okay, great. Good morning, Chair and members of the board. I'm Corey Bell, a senior attorney with the Natural Resources Defense Council, and I'd like to talk briefly about removing sources of lead from our drinking water system in California. Across California, water systems have been performing partial replacements of service lines. Utilities have been removing what we call the user service line, or the section of the water line that runs from the water main in the street to the water meter, and leaving the rest of the service line intact, the part that runs from the meter to the home. Utilities are performing these partial replacements when there is lead or unknown material in the user portion of the line. Often the remaining pipe is galvanized. These galvanized pipes are problematic for many reasons, as Dr. Olson from the University of Michigan will detail in a minute. But for now, it's just important to know that these pipes can be a long-term source of lead in home drinking water. Because water systems across California have been performing partial replacements and leaving the potential source of lead exposure in place, we've been working tirelessly on a bill, AB 1931, that would make it more difficult for systems to perform partial replacements and also make sure that the state doesn't miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime federal funding that's available for precisely these activities over the next 5 years. These funds from the Biden infrastructure law could total over $1 billion for California to do exactly the work that's outlined in AB 1931. But if the state continues to only focus on the user portion of the line and not on remedying the previous partials that already took place, California will miss out on hundreds of millions of dollars of free federal money. We're currently working on amendments, and we look forward to working with the board on the issue of how to best protect residents from previous and ongoing partial replacements and the harms posed by galvanized lines that remain in the drinking water system. We hope that the board will continue to work with us to find a solution and to ensure that California reaps the benefit of this gift from the federal government. The alternative is saddling utilities and residents with the cost of removing lead from our drinking water system sometime in the near future and exposing residents to lead in the meantime. Thank you for the opportunity to comment this morning. And now I think Dr. Olson might be speaking next.
Thank you. And as we transition to Dr. Olson, I want to acknowledge that board member Laurel Firestone is also with us here remotely on the platform. So thank you. Dr. Olson, please.
Good morning. My name is Teresa Olson. In May of this year, I retired as a professor of environmental engineering from the University of Michigan. Prior to retiring, my laboratory conducted lead monitoring research in drinking water, including during the Flint water crisis in Michigan. Today, my comments seek to provide the science and engineering-based rationale for public safety measures contained in California Bill AB 1931. A key provision of the bill is a restriction of partial replacements of lead components in service lines. In California, lead pipes are most often found as pure lead goosenecks. These are short connector segments between the water mains and the service lines. As lead-free water passes from the water main through the lead gooseneck, water unfortunately picks up lead. And when certain service line materials like galvanized iron are present downstream from the gooseneck, lead can deposit on the galvanized iron. Galvanized iron plumbing is problematic as a lead source for a couple reasons. First, the zinc coating on newer galvanized pipe can contain up to 2% lead, and hence it can be a source of lead itself. Secondly, after the zinc coating corrodes, the underlying iron rusts, and those layers of rust are very good at absorbing the lead coming from the gooseneck. For these reasons, galvanized iron is no longer installed as a drinking water plumbing material. My home state of Michigan recently required that the galvanized iron service lines that were downstream from lead pipes be replaced as part of its revised lead and copper rule. This change was made based on the lessons from the Flint water crisis. While many communities with galvanized iron service lines do not have a history of corrosion problems, unexpected changes in water quality can cause corrosion issues. The city of Fresno, California, for example, which introduced new surface water sources in 2004, suddenly experienced corrosion of its many galvanized service lines. If galvanized pipes are left in the ground after replacing the lead goosenecks, there is a looming potential lead exposure threat that is also left for unsuspecting community water systems. Requiring the removal of downstream galvanized service lines at the same time the lead gooseneck is removed, as proposed in AB 1931, ensures that the threat is eliminated and that utilities no longer need to maintain records of the pipe's past exposure to lead. With the newly available federal infrastructure funds that Corey mentioned to support lead abatement in drinking water, it makes sense to capitalize on this timely opportunity in order to remove as much lead as possible. The policy is also cost efficient, since coming back much later to replace galvanized pipe means tearing up the street pavement yet a second time. In the interest of public safety, I hope the board will work to support and promote the removal of all lead containing components as outlined in AB 1931. Thank you for this opportunity to comment today.
Thank you, Dr. Olson. Next, I'd like to call up Jen Engstrom, who will be followed by Susan Little here in person.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jen Engstrom, and I am the State Director for CalPIRG. We're a statewide consumer advocacy organization. I'm here today to echo the concerns over the current lead line replacement process in California, which lacks public health protections to prevent Californians from unknowingly consuming toxic lead. Lead, as you all know, is highly toxic, especially to children. Even exposure to very small amounts is linked to irreversible damage to a child's brain and can cause IQ loss, ADHD, and anxiety disorders. And that's why all lead-bearing parts need to be removed from our drinking water system, and it needs to be done carefully with safety precautions in place. Information from Public Records Act requests indicate that California water utilities up and down the state are replacing lead pipes and fittings without timely, strong, or consistent health protections. Over 50% of the water systems that have reported known or probable lead lines and fittings were partially replaced, leaving pipes and other components in the ground that can continue to leach lead into our customers' drinking water. And this practice can actually lead to spikes in lead exposure as the lead in the remaining components become dislodged by the disturbance. When lead lines and components are removed, all lead-bearing parts should be removed, including lead fittings and goosenecks and galvanized lines that are or were downstream of lead pipes or fittings. California doesn't actually have that many traditional lead pipes anymore, but our communities are exposed to lead from contaminated galvanized lines. Studies have shown that galvanized pipes that have been attached to a lead component become contaminated with lead. And that buildup of lead in the galvanized line can be released at any time, even after the source of lead has been removed, and particularly after a partial replacement or other line disturbance. As you've heard in Fresno, last year, testing revealed that the water of more than 300 residents was contaminated with lead caused by corroded galvanized pipes after the water source was changed. In order to protect Californians from lead exposure, we need to remove problematic galvanized lines. Other states and cities in the US are taking action. DC Water conducted a robust study of the problem of lead released from galvanized lines, and now DC is treating galvanized service lines the same way they treat lead lines by fully replacing them. Fortunately, funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law provides a golden opportunity to get all of the lead out of our drinking water systems and provides the resources to do it properly. AB 1931 will help the Water Board take advantage of the billions of dollars available to California to completely pay for the removal of both customer side lines and galvanized lines downstream of lead lines and fittings. And the EPA guidelines for this funding support this action. Especially in a drought-prone state where water is scarce, we should be taking advantage of this new funding to fix this problem and ensure safe drinking water for all Californians. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Engstrom. Next, I'd like to call up Susan Little, and who will be followed by Peter Martin remotely. Good morning, Ms. Little. Yeah, there's a button there. There you go. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for having us today. Appreciate the time and the board's interest in this issue. Well, so my name's Susan Little. I'm with the Environmental Working Group. I'm the senior advocate here in Sacramento. As you've already heard from Dr. Olson and my colleagues with the Natural Resources Defense Council and CalPIRG, they have reminded the board that nearly 50% of utilities reporting lead service lines have already completed their work according to the board's timelines. This work was done in the absence of required public health protections and most likely resulted in the disruption of thousands upon thousands of lead and galvanized lines. These disrupted lines, which could be leaching lead, are still delivering water to customers today. And while Californians were not protected from possible lead exposure caused by the disruptions and removals that have already taken place, the attempts by the Division of Drinking Water to impose health protections on the activity happening now fall short. First, it's our understanding that the division's permit amendments that were issued in March have only been issued to a fraction of the water systems currently removing lead service lines. So many systems are removing So many systems are removing and replacing lines now without clear requirements to protect public health. Also, the permit amendments that were issued don't meet the health protective standards set forth by the EPA's recently approved lead and copper rule revisions. The permit amendments impose some requirements on water systems when they're removing lead and unknown user service lines, but the amendments don't ensure that customers are fully protected from exposure. For instance, the LCRR requires water systems to inform customers and provide filters and other protections before turning the customer's water back on. The division's permit amendments, however, don't impose such a requirement. Water systems can remove or disrupt a lead line, turn the water back on, and then notify the customer and provide filters sometime after lead has already flushed into the customer's home. In addition, the LCRR requires water systems to provide notice, filters, and educational materials whenever most disruptions requiring water to be shut off are done to a lead line. The permit amendments ignore such disruptions, which are many, and only require public health protections when planned replacements occur. And I'd like to point out that since so much removal and replacement activity has already happened and is continuing, the board's plan to address problems posed by the activity through the development of the LCRR regulations will come too late. Most of the work will have been completed by the time those regulations are approved. These failings and others are why EWG, NRDC, and CalPERG are co-sponsoring AB 1931 by Assemblymember Luce Rivas. AB 1931, as proposed to be amended, would bring California into compliance with federal rules now in effect and ensure that Californians are protected from lead exposure as the remaining lead user service lines are replaced. AB 1931 will also allow Californians to benefit from the billions of federal dollars coming to the state to fund customer-side lead and galvanized service line replacements. Californians need these funds to remove the lines that remain on their property, lines that were disrupted by water systems and could continue to deposit lead and other heavy metals into customers' drinking water. If the state does not do all that it can to get as much of the available federal funds as possible, we will miss an enormous opportunity to get a large source of lead out of our drinking water. And the state's failure to recognize the problem will take hundreds of millions, if not possibly billions, as we understand, of dollars from the pockets of California's families. We'd ask that the board come alongside us and support 1931 as proposed to be amended. And we've provided these amendments to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Little. Appreciate your time and others this morning in addressing the board on this important topic. Next, I'd like to call up Peter Martin, and then remotely, and then in person, we have our last commenter, Bob Core.
And Mr. Martin does not appear to be on the platform.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Laffer. Then we'll move on to Mr. Gore.
Good morning, Chair and Vice Chair, and remotely members Morgan and Firestone. I'm Bob Gore from the Gualco Group here on behalf of the city of Antioch. As we move into the fall and the rains return, and we're all recalling the famous passage from East of Eden, which I almost forgot, we'll move inevitably to permanent drought response and regulation. At that time, the city of Antioch looks forward to providing a few unique perspectives on that topic. And we also wish to thank Eric Ekdahl and his staff for assembling early and allowing their valuable time to give us some early guidance. And again, we look forward to contribute to permanent drought regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gore. Really appreciate your time this morning. That wraps up public forum. Ms. Townsend, unless there's anyone else. Okay, thank you. And appreciate everyone's time in addressing the board this morning. That brings us to our board agenda now. And the first item is adoption and consideration of board meeting minutes from the June 7th and the June 21st and 22nd board meetings. Are there any edits amongst any of my colleagues? And if not, do we have a motion?
I have a motion. Do you want me to, do you want them taken up separately? Okay, so I'll move adoption of the June 7th meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you, board members. Ms. Townsend, can you please call a roll call vote?
Board Member Morgan,
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo,
Aye.
Board Member Firestone,
Aye.
Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. The item carries and the board meeting minutes from June 7th are adopted. 1.5 now we'll say for the June 21st and 22nd board meeting minutes. Are there any amendments? And otherwise, do we have a motion?
I'll move adoption of the June 21st, 22nd meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you. Ms. Townsend, can you please call the roll call vote?
Vice Chair Diadamo,
Aye.
Board Member Morgan.
Aye.
Board Member Firestone,
Aye.
Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you as well. And the board meeting minutes from the June 21st and 22nd board meeting is adopted. Next, we'll move on to our uncontested item, which is item number 2. Is it's still uncontested, Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Unless any board member would like to have a discussion on it, and appreciate everyone's good work on the item, but otherwise we can have a motion.
I'll move adoption of item 2, uncontested item.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Townsend. Can you please call the roll call vote?
Vice Chair Diadamo,
Aye.
I think it's because your mic may not be on
Board
down
Member
there.
Firestone,
Aye.
Board Member Morgan,
Aye.
Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And item number 2 is adopted. And thank you, everyone, again. That brings us to item number 3, an item from the Division of Financial Assistance. And we'd like to call up our folks here presenting on the item. And here, before we get into this discussion, which it's a resolution that will authorize funding for a number of water quality projects down at the border, I want to acknowledge that we have Secretary Jared Blumenfeld here with us from the California Environmental Protection Agency, and I'm glad to be able to have him here remotely with us. And so we'll have a quick introduction on the item, and we'll kick it over to the Secretary to say some words.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel, Vice Chair Diadamo, and board members. My name is Kim Din, and I'm a supervising engineer overseeing the bond section in the Division of Financial Assistance. To my left is Christopher Stevens and Craig Scholler with Cal EPA, and Anthony Austin with the Office of Chief Counsel. Today, I'm seeking the board's adoption of resolution to authorize the Deputy Director of DFA to approve and fund projects to address the water quality issues in the rivers that come across the border from Mexico. Next, please. The draft resolution would authorize the Deputy Director to execute and amend a grant agreement and do all things necessary to fund projects identified in the attachment 1. Fund projects with priorities identified in the Budget Act of 2021. Fund non-priority projects after accounting for funding priority projects, and to add new projects and execute and amend grant agreements consistent with the funding priorities. Next, please. The Budget Act of 2021 appropriated $20 million to the State Water Board to address water quality problems arising in the rivers that come across the border from Mexico. The Budget Act of 2022 appropriated an additional $15 million for the same purpose. Less than 5% authorized from both budget acts for the administrative costs There is approximately $33 million total in available for projects. The Budget Act of 2021 directed the State Water Board to prioritize projects that have funding committed by one of the other governments to complement the funds appropriated. Next, please. The Budget Act of 2021 also directed the State Water Board and Cal EPA to consult and coordinate with the legislature across the border on cross-border collaboration and the expenditure of the funds. Cal EPA and the State Water Board staff met with the executive officers of the Colorado River, San Diego Region and San Diego Regional Boards, along with representatives from agencies and organizations listed on this slide, to identify projects that could improve cross-border river quality, can be completed within 3 years, and provide the California side benefits. Next, please. These binational strategic plans convene all border region stakeholders to identify top priority projects, as we identified in the attachment 1. Next, please. So these are the next step. Please note that the information in the attachment 1 is very preliminary. Therefore, if the draft resolution is adopted, staff will reach out to these applicants to refine their project scope, budget, and schedule. This can be viewed as a mini solicitation. Due to the short time to encumber and liquidate the funds, staff will ask applicants to submit necessary supporting documents to including proof of funds committed by one of the other governments within a short and reasonable time. This will give staff enough information to prioritize projects and distribute funds in the timely manner. Once the priority projects are identified, staff will work on executing the funding agreements as soon as practicable. And finally, staff will continue to coordinate with Cal EPA to identify additional priority and non-priority projects. Next, please. Well, this concludes my presentation, and I am open for questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate, I know the intense amount of coordination that's going on the border, both with our federal partners and importantly with the California Environmental Protection Agency. And I want to now acknowledge and call up to give comment here, Secretary Jared Blumenfeld from the California Environmental Protection Agency. Good to have you here today, Jared.
Thank you, Chair Esquivel. Thank you, board members. Really appreciate you focusing this committee hearing on this today. This is a huge priority for this administration, and I think for all of us at Cal EPA and the water board's been a huge amount of effort and focus, and really appreciate board member Laurel Firestone came down, and we were just in the border region in the New River recently. Today we're here really to focus on this $20 million that was allocated to the New and Tijuana rivers. As many of the hearings have in the past and continue to focus on, these two river systems are some of the most impaired water bodies in our state. The rivers face severe impacts from raw sewage, trash, sedimentation, and just in the Tijuana River estuary that I visited a few weeks ago, there was about 5 feet of plastic in what was once a natural channel. Senate Bill 170, which passed in the fall of 2021, made $20 million available to address water quality problems arising in the rivers that come across the border from Mexico. And since that time, we've worked incredibly hard with your boards, Joaquin, the regional boards, stakeholders, members of the legislature, to identify projects that can improve cross-border water quality. We also work with the regional boards to bring in local cities, counties, nonprofits, the federal government, state partners, and importantly, the community to identify priority projects for possible funding under SB 170. These priorities build on decades of experience within our cross-border program within Cal EPA and also within historic and ongoing work under the California-Mexico Border Relations Council, and our border region water boards also inform project selection. The priorities build upon existing binational collaboration and strategic plans such as the Tijuana River Needs and Opportunities Assessment, the Tijuana River Recovery Strategy, the New River Strategic Plan, US EPA's Border 2025 program, and the IBWC's treaty minute processes and groups such as the Binational Technical Working Group and the Minute 320 group. So no shortage of plans. What has been short in the past is funding. So this is why I think the pump is primed for us to get a lot of work done. The priorities that we're putting forward fit within the timelines under SB 170 and will have, importantly, meaningful, measurable impact on the region. Obviously, there's no shortage of additional incredibly worthy projects, and we hope that this is the beginning of state investment, and that we can keep pushing forward in this regard. And in fact, the legislature just recently allocated an additional $15 million to address border water quality issues in the recent budget bill signed by the governor. And we look forward to working with the Water Board and leveraging these funds, as well as those funds committed by US EPA and other border projects. I'm here today to thank the board, your staff, and many others who have provided important input on making sure that these dollars move forward quickly. And I'm very supportive of the resolution before you today. Both Craig Schuller and Peter Becker from Cal EPA are also here to take any questions that you may have as this proceeding moves forward. So back over to you, Chair Esquivel.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you prioritizing this conversation and the needs down in the border region. As you said, transboundary pollution challenges are some of our thorniest because it requires really important relationships, obviously, with the federal government, with foreign governments here. But as we know, the environment, it doesn't see those borders. And instead, we have a shared lived experience down in the border region that is really requiring us to invest. And in ways, to your point, Secretary, that we just haven't, I think, had the opportunity here generationally to really try to tackle this. And 20 million isn't going to solve it. Neither will the 15 here still coming. But what it really does do is create momentum and opportunity and the resources for us to have the conversations that we need to have. These are not easy issues to address, but thanks to the real advocacy of the communities for a long while now, and here the opportunity of alignment with the federal government, importantly with you and here the state government, and then at the local level to really get something done is exciting. So we appreciate your prioritizing this discussion, being here with us, and look forward to what is a lot of incredible opportunity we have as well.
The only other thing I'd say, Chair Esquivel, is just huge amount of kudos to Assembly Member Eduardo Garcia. Really, his incredible tenacity, starting as mayor in Coachella and moving all the way to becoming an Assembly member. He has been dogged on this, as well as Senator Benway. So two folks really focus on making this happen. So I really want to thank them personally.
Here. Thank you. Other board colleagues that would like to make comment and/or questions? Board Member Firestone, please.
I'll just to clarify, this resolution would be approving authorization for both the 20 million and the 15, I believe. Just want to confirm that with staff.
Yes, that's correct. So we put both of those sums in the resolution.
And appreciate the good work of quickly doing that to be able to take advantage of what was the recently passed budget agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just say thank you. And, these projects that can be supported by this have been priorities for the regional boards as well as the communities and the state board for many years. They're many years in the making. I know in particular was able to visit and see the New River project, which has a long history of investment and commitment from our region down there. So really hoping and looking for us to get this funding into these projects as quickly as possible. and make sure we can get over this final hump of getting these projects implemented that have been in the works and needed for a long time. And
Here,
I'm
here.
happy to make a motion for adoption unless other board members or the chair wanted to.
Thank you, board member. Yeah, I'll leave it open for other board members to make comment, and we do have about 3 public commenters that we can get to as well. So we'll get to those and appreciate your offer for the motion. Let's go ahead and get to our commenters. And so our first commenter will be Francisco Zamora from the Sonoran Institute.
Thank you. My name is Francisco Zamora. I'm the Senior Director of Programs at the Sonoran Institute, and I have been working along the border for over 20 years. And in the last 10 years, we have been addressing the issues of the New River at its source. So I'm talking about on the Mexican side. But of course, we have been also collaborating with Cali PA for many years, and with IWC, SILA, and many other stakeholders. So I want to thank Secretary Jarrett for all the support and for all the work that Cali PA has been doing in the last few years along the border, and also for including our project, Nature-Based Solutions for improving water quality of the New River in the Mexicali region as part of the priorities. We already began that project this year with support from private sources, and we got the support from the state agencies, from the federal agencies. We even have an agreement with the mayor of Mexicali to work on the New River in Mexicali. So again, I just want to say thank you all for the support, for identifying our project as priority, and for giving us the opportunity to potentially receive some funding for implementation of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zamora. And for the Institute's long-standing continued great work in the region, it's important and critical that, and to acknowledge the fact that it's partners that actually get this work done. And so really appreciate your contributions and your time this morning.
Thank you.
Next, it's with great pleasure that I call up Jose Angel from the city of Calexico.
Thank you, Chairman Esquivel. Good to hear from all of you. We don't have anything in particular to say other than we're here to answer any questions the board may have about New River pollution from Mexico, and in particular, the New River Improvement Project for the Calexico region.
Thank you, and just have to acknowledge your long-standing, incredible force and presence in these projects, Mr. Angel. For those of you that don't know, Mr. Angel was our former executive officer for the Regional Water Quality Control Board and has been an incredible advocate for these issues for a long while. So just thank you for your continued voice and championing of all these issues. And next, I'd like to then also have great pleasure call up Rebecca Terraza Baxter as well, former colleague. Good to see you.
Great. Good morning. Good to see you as well. Thank you very much for the time. Once again, my name is Rebecca Terraza Baxter. I am the Intergovernmental Relations Director for the County of Imperial. And I'm here this morning actually to express our support of item 3, especially the funding that is identified for the New River Improvement Project and all of the work that has been done, not just from the Water Board and Cali PA and all these different parties, but also our local organizations and Mr. Jose Angel in the city of Calexico for this project. At the same time, I would like to share with this board the desire to also include some potential funding for the County of Imperial to develop a preliminary engineering report at the New River. For many years, the Imperial County Board of Supervisors has sounded the alarm on the ecological, environmental, and public health disasters occurring in and around the New River. Though some efforts definitely have been made over the years, there are some water quality issues that we wish to address in the future. Recently, the County of Imperial has obtained authorization for some federal funding to develop this preliminary engineering report. This would be in coordination and consultation with the Army Corps of Engineers. It would include a hydrologic analysis as well as comprehensive water quality sampling and analysis. So the County of Imperial believes that the preliminary engineering report will also help to identify a recommended course of action and viable alternatives to address the water quality issues north of the Calexico Reach at the river. So this would essentially at the end of the day complement the New River Improvement Project and the work that has already taken place and is currently taking place. We do have a long-term commitment as well with the New River Improvement Project as far as $50,000 for annual operations and maintenance funding. And so we wish to complement that with this potential study that we can conduct. So we just wanted to speak to the merit of that proposed project and respectfully request that the board and the Deputy Director of DFA consider adding that project to this list of cross-border potential projects that you currently have under consideration. So once again, thank you very much for your time. Thank you all very much for your leadership to preserve, enhance, and restore the quality of California's water resources at the end of the day. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Terrazas Baxter. I appreciate your continued advocacy. And when it comes to that request, let me just make sure that there's just the flexibility. I know we did, provide plenty of flexibility for DFA to make some adjustment when it comes to the projects that ultimately are selected. The project that the Imperial Counties just mentioned isn't necessarily precluded from any of that, right? And just want to kind of understand that.
Correct. There is that flexibility. So resolve number 4 authorizes the Deputy Director of DFA in coordination with Cal EPA to add new projects and then fund those consistent with the funding priorities in resolve number 2 and 3. So we've got to be mindful of those priorities that were established in the Budget Act of 2021. But yeah, we can add additional projects.
Yeah, and I think thematically, when it comes to an engineering report, more comprehensive assessment of sources and being able to manage water quality in the New River, we're there. So whether it's these vehicles or just understanding the federal funding that Imperial will be receiving and the scope of that project, we're here to understand and coordinate and be supportive of the outcomes I think we're all very much driving towards. So appreciate the flag and thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of our commenters. Is there any other discussion amongst board members? And I'm trying to glance down, digital and in-person opportunity to make sure the board is comfortable. And if so, I think Board Member Firestone, we may be ready for a motion.
All right, I'll move to adopt item 3, the resolution.
I'll second.
Fantastic. Ms. Townsend, can you please call a roll call vote?
Board Member Firestone.
Aye.
Board Member Morgan.
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you as well. The vote is unanimous and the resolution is adopted. Thanks everyone for the really incredible work. There's still a lot more to go. And again, all across here to the Cal EPA, the Secretary and our federal partners really, and importantly, the local leadership here appreciate the opportunity to do our part and fund these critical projects. So thank you everyone. That concludes item number 3 then. And hold on 1 second. My pages everywhere. Brings us to item number 4, which is a consideration of a proposed resolution to adopt the draft Proposition 64 Groundwater Drinking Water Treatment Operations and Maintenance Funding Program Guidelines. Just a slight shuffle. Good morning.
Morning, Chair Esquivel, Vice Chair Diadamo, and members of the board. My name is Alex Huang, and I'm a senior engineering geologist in the Division of Financial Assistance, DFA. To my left, you will find Christopher Stevens, Kim Din, and Doug Bojack from the Office of Chief Counsel, and Diana Conkle is joining us through Zoom. Next slide, please. Today, we are asking the board to adopt the Proposition 68 Groundwater, Drinking Water Treatment Operations and Maintenance Funding Program Guidelines. The draft resolution also authorizes the Deputy Director of DFA to award and encumber the remaining Prop 68 Chapter 11.1 funds through the end of 2022, consistent with the guidelines. And it reiterates the authorization in State Water Board Resolution 2020-28 that allows the Deputy Director of DFA to redirect any funds remaining unencumbered after 2022 to projects executed pursuant to the older Prop 68 groundwater guidelines. Next slide, please. Chapter 11.1 of Prop 68 allocates $80 million in grant funds for treatment and remediation activities that prevent or reduce the contamination of groundwater that serves as a source of drinking water. After accounting for administrative and bond sale costs, $74 million was available for projects. Of that amount, $16 million was set aside for projects serving severely disadvantaged communities. Funding guidelines for the Proposition 68 Groundwater Treatment and Remediation Grant Program were adopted by the State Water Board on August 20th, 2019. Next slide, please. After committing funds to 6 projects under the previous Prop 68 guidelines, approximately $29.5 million in Chapter 11.1 funding remains uncommitted. Of that amount, approximately $8.5 million is reserved for severely disadvantaged communities. We are verifying the disadvantaged community status of projects that we had previously funded. So the minimum amount of remaining funds that must go to projects benefiting severely disadvantaged communities may ultimately differ from what is shown on this slide. DFA proposes to award the remaining Prop 68 groundwater treatment and remediation funds to one or more technical assistance providers to assist DFA with distributing O&M funding to drinking water systems that treat groundwater and serve disadvantaged communities. This is in line with the spirit of Resolution 2020-28, which delegated authority to DFA to award Prop 68 funds for drinking water treatment projects. The funds must be encumbered by June 30th, 2024, and liquidated by June 30th, 2026. Next slide, please. On this slide, you'll see a high-level view of the funding program that would be established if the draft guidelines were adopted. The State Water Board Division of Financial Assistance will select one or more technical assistance providers based on letters of interest received in response to our request for letters of interest in 2021. Only letters of interest received by July 12th, 2021 will be considered. The selected technical assistance provider would then serve as intermediaries between DFA and the water systems. Next slide, please. Next, I'd like to draw your attention to the bottom left of this graphic. Under this arrangement, water systems would send their applications and other supporting documents to the technical assistance providers, who will evaluate the applications, rank eligible projects, and then make recommendations up to DFA. Next slide, please. DFA will then approve or deny the TA provider's recommendations. DFA will also reimburse water systems for eligible operations and maintenance expenses. Next slide. The draft guidelines were released for public comment on April 22nd, and comments were due on May 31st. A total of 3 public workshops were held across the state, one in Sacramento, one in Fresno, and one in Glendale. Next slide. We received 2 sets of public comments regarding the draft guidelines, which I'll summarize here. The San Gabriel Basin Water Quality Authority, often called WQA, asked us to consider the legislative intent behind Prop 1 and Prop 68 in making our decisions as to what to do next. Self-Help Enterprises asked us to allow additional time to submit letters of interest for other TA providers. They proposed changes to several eligibility and prioritization criteria that we have in the draft guidelines, and they asked us to implement some programmatic changes that were not specific to the draft guidelines. Next slide, please. We responded to the San Gabriel Basin Water Quality Authority, stating that WQA and its member agencies are the primary recipients of Proposition 68 Chapter 11.1 funding already, haven't been awarded approximately 89% of funds encumbered to date, or approximately 54% of what's available out of the original 74 million. Furthermore, additional funds may be available after December 2022 that will go towards projects that were previously funded under the older set of Prop 68 guidelines. Next slide, please. For self-help enterprises, we responded that if we were to ask for additional letters of interest, it would delay program implementation, and it appears there's adequate TA provider interest already. The proposed changes from self-help they're already either allowed in the draft guidelines, prohibited by the Prop 68 statute, or are infeasible to implement for one reason or another. And we will consider the suggested programmatic changes. Detailed responses to public comments can be found as a link embedded within item 4 of this board meeting's agenda. Next slide, please. For our next steps, we will, if the board adopts the new guidelines, DFA will select technical assistance providers. We will execute grant agreement with those TA providers, and we will identify water systems that are likely to meet the eligibility criteria laid out in the guidelines. Next slide, please. That's all we have today. Are there any questions from the board members or the public?
Just a lot of thanks. As always, I know that these aren't easy issues to sometimes balance out, but given the pressures of drought, given what we know is the need to bring on local sources, often contaminated groundwater here that is maybe not within reach because of affordability issues, but can be with state subsidy here, is just really important to get out and to get right, so that we're ensuring we're really hitting those communities that really need it most. So I appreciate the balance. I appreciate the thoughtfulness that we really approached with the project here, and I'm wholly supportive. I really don't have any question off the top, but I'm looking at my fellow board colleagues remotely and here in person, and just kick it over to them for any questions or comments. So thank you. And hearing none, then we can, I believe we have one commenter, and Jose may have, I don't know if he's still on the platform with us. He is. And so we have Jose Angel from Calexico.
Actually, Chairman Esquivel, thank you. I'm here in my own capacity. It's an item that I've been tracking. I have a personal interest because oftentimes, as you all know, most of the marginalized communities get left without much needed funding for some of their infrastructure, and particularly as it relates to groundwater. I also want to commend the staff for the tremendous job that they've done in balancing the available funding with the priorities and needs of the state. So that's my only comment. I've just been tracking this item for personal purposes. I'm concerned about, in particular, the Central Valley, where some of the more sensible and marginalized communities are left behind sometimes. But I want to commend the board also and encourage the board that you adopt the item as recommended by the staff.
Thank you so much, Mr. Angel, for tracking the item and here raising your voice and advocating. I really appreciate it. Board members, any questions or comments? And then otherwise, would entertain a motion.
I'll just maybe, I don't know if it's a question, but just a comment that, I mean, in addition to thanking staff and stakeholders, and I think, echoing both the chairs and Mr. Angel's comments, that I think this really reflects the priorities and is a really needed investment in communities that need it most. We have increased affordability challenges, and that will only increase more. So having the ability to do O&M subsidy is vital for helping to address those affordability challenges. I would just say, to the extent that we can connect the TA providers that are administering this to those communities that have ranked highest or worse in the affordability risk criteria that we've done for SAFER, so that we can just try to help with outreach or provide information for the TA providers to conduct outreach for those communities that are highest risk for affordability within DACs. That would be, I think, important. But we have great tools and analysis to help us and TA providers do that. And it's just really wonderful that we're able to make these kinds of programs and investments. So appreciate all of staff's work on this. I'd be happy to make a motion for adoption of item 4.
Thank you, board member.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Townsend. Can you please call a roll call vote?
Board Member Firestone.
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo.
Aye.
Board Member Morgan.
Aye.
Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Townsend. The vote carries unanimously and the item is adopted. Thank you again for the good work. Look forward to hearing the projects that get funded and ultimately the good that it's going to do in communities. So thank you all. Let's go ahead and give ourselves a 10-minute break. We're doing well on time and may as well afford ourselves. So let's go ahead and come back here at, we'll just say 10:40 and appreciate everyone's time. We'll continue on to item number 5 at that time.
I know you're doing great. That's your product. Yeah.
No way. You gotta find the right.
It should. Fortunately, hear about it in the bar. It's very complex. I don't know. Some change. I have a lot of that. With the cold. It's very cold. I can imagine lots of ways right out in that. And it won't be half as fine. The water. This is super interesting. There's significant inertia for those internal right now. It doesn't happen all the time. Yeah. Yeah, we did it. Just did a power process. I mean, it's expensive. But you're sure it's a thing. Yeah, it's one of those things that is probably for. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that it worked. It worked out. Yep.
You don't want people to
how does it work? I mean, in the sense of what's the exploding? We're not sure. Wow. I think it's wild. It's IB. It's an IC. What is an IB? Where's the idea of what? In the neck. Because it's attached to the ceiling and then it like probably on a track. When it's done, not for. I have. Sorry. Yeah, this is just. March. 90 days, 30 days of stall that. 90 days before you get your tax on it. It's like, you know, let's go. It's like a kid, probably. Yeah. Nice to be here. I know it's not required. The first time 2.5 years. Do I remember how to do it? I've called that. Good, good. Yeah, still downstairs. It'll be back. I was on back. Oh, it's practice. Yeah, practice. Forward and back. That's what I was told, but I did almost that. So. I'm over now. Oh. I know what I'm letting. And I was not. Even the parent trustee. And that was the first round. You figured you can handle it, you're on your own. Let's come to the last minute. He was really on the.
Okay, we are now at 10:41, so we can return back. And we return back to item number 5 and would like to look over to Nicole Quincy. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Kenzie.
Good morning. Good to see you both in person and virtually, board members. Good morning. I'm Nicole Kinsey, a hearing officer with the board's Administrative Hearings Office, which I will refer to as the AHO in this presentation. And now that I'm sitting here, I realize I don't think I have a advanced.
Oh, it's just the voice advance.
Slide?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Latest technology.
Yes, no, it works perfect. Thank you. Please advance. I'm presenting to you today a proposed order canceling or in the alternative denying San Joaquin County's water right application 29657. San Joaquin County filed application 29657 in 1990 for a permit to appropriate water from the South Fork American River. The county and local agencies within the county have a long history of pursuing access to American River water supplies to meet demands within the county. This history is described in section 3.1 of the proposed order, and I believe representatives from the county are here today and will likely address that history in some more detail in their presentation to you. But it's my understanding that the county filed application 29657 in an attempt to protect its access to American River water supplies when it was unable to obtain a contract for American River water with the Bureau of Reclamation. The county has since filed 4 amendments to its application over the years, which revised the proposed points of diversion and the places of storage under the application. The 2003 amendment added a new proposed point of diversion at the Freeport Regional Water Project intake facility, which I'll refer to as the Freeport facility, on the Sacramento River, and eliminated all other points of diversion. As currently proposed, the 4th amended application seeks to divert water from the South Fork American River at the Freeport facility by direct diversion and by diversion to underground storage. The division publicly noticed the county's third amended application in 2008 and received 16 protests. In 2010, the board's Division of Water Rights canceled application 29657 because the county had failed to provide information requested by the division that was necessary for the board to act on the application, including documentation that the county had obtained access to the proposed point of diversion at the Freeport facility and a project-level environmental impact report. In 2011, the executive director reinstated application 29657. In order Water Right 2011-0014. But this order directs the applicant that the county must also still complete the required CEQA document and respond to all outstanding protests, secure access to its currently proposed point of diversion. And the order does not excuse the county from the requirement for diligent progress towards completion of these goals. The order remanded the matter to the division to determine the appropriateness of and take action on the county's most recent submitted project schedule. And such action might include a cancellation of application 29657 if it becomes apparent that the county will not meet the timeline in any division-approved project schedule. After the executive director reinstated the application, the division approved an application development schedule that identified 18 different categories of information that the county needed to provide before the division could act on the application. The letter from the division setting the application development schedule stated that the county must submit this information by the deadlines, the latest of which was December 31st, 2014, or the division would again cancel the application. In 2014, the county submitted a fourth amended application, and with that application, a modified development schedule. This is the last communication in the record for this application before the matter was assigned to the AHO in 2020. The division never approved the county's modified proposed development schedule, and the county ultimately didn't meet the deadlines either in the approved schedule or in its alternative unapproved proposed schedule. This matter remained dormant, at least on the division side, from 2014 until 2020, when the executive director assigned this matter to the AHO for further proceedings. The AHO held a public hearing on September 29th, 2021, to consider whether the board should cancel application 29567 for failure of the applicant to provide the information requested by the board and necessary to act on the application, and whether the board should deny application 29657 because of the county's lack of diligence in pursuing the application. On January 27th of this year, the AHO circulated a draft proposed order based on the evidence gathered during the hearing, and that draft proposed order would cancel or in the alternative deny application 29657. San Joaquin County submitted comments opposing the draft proposed order, and these comments are addressed in attachment A of the proposed order that's before you. San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority also submitted a minor comment which the AHO addressed in the proposed order, and they also expressed support for that proposed order. California Department of Fish and Wildlife submitted a statement of support for the proposed order as well. On May 27th, the AHO transmitted the proposed order to the clerk of the board. This proposed order before you would cancel application 29657 under Water Code 1276 and 1335 because the county did not submit information requested by the division to support its application and has not demonstrated good cause to support a further extension of time. In the alternative, the proposed order denies application 29657 under California Code of Regulations Title 23, Section 840, because based on the evidence presented during the hearing, the county does not intend to diligently prosecute necessary construction or use of water, and the county will be unable to proceed with the proposed project within a reasonable time. Importantly, the proposed order cancels and denies the application without prejudice, which means that the county preserves its right to file a new application for the same or a similar project when it is ready to diligently pursue the project and submit the information necessary for the division to act on the application. Stockton East Water District and San Joaquin County submitted comments on the proposed order opposing cancellation or denial of the application, and California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance and California Department of Fish and Wildlife submitted comments supporting the proposed order. An important distinction that I'd like to make here regarding this proceeding which involves an application to appropriate water as compared to other matters that are pending before the division and the AHO, which concern water right permits that the board have already issued, is that unlike a permit, an application for a permit to appropriate water is not a water right itself. Until the application to appropriate is acted upon by the State Water Board and granted, and the issuance of a permit is directed, the applicant has no property right of any kind. A water right application is effectively a placeholder for a priority date if the applicant is diligently pursuing its proposed appropriation. But it cannot be used to reserve a priority date without a definite project in mind and both the intent and ability to pursue the project with diligence. This proposed order would cancel application 29657 in part because the applicant did not submit information in response to repeated requests by the division, which are documented here on this slide. These requests occurred over a 20-year period leading up to cancellation of the application in 2010. Next slide, please. On October 3rd, 2011, even after the executive director reinstated the application, the division detailed its request for information, but the county still failed to meet this new deadline of December 31st, 2014 to submit the various categories of information, including, very importantly, documentation of the county's access to the proposed point of diversion and a final project level EIR. The proposed order would also deny application 29657 because the county failed to demonstrate due diligence in pursuing its proposed project. An applicant for a permit to appropriate water must have a definite project in mind and display not only the ability, but also the intent to proceed with reasonable diligence with the construction work and application of the water to the proposed uses. One who does not propose to proceed immediately with development of a project cannot make a reservation of water for future needs by the expedient of simply filing an application. California Code of Regulations, Title 23, Section 840 states specifically that an application will be denied when the applicant does not intend to initiate construction of the works required for the contemplated use of water within a reasonable time, and thereafter diligently prosecute the construction and use of water to completion. Or if the applicant will not be able to proceed within a reasonable time, either because of absence of a feasible plan, lack of required financial resources, or other cause. During the hearing, the county described various planning efforts that it has undertaken over the past number of years to identify financially feasible water supply projects, which included some projects that would rely on American River water as a source. However, as you can see on the slide, the IRWMP and ICU programmatic EIR were completed before the division canceled application 29657 in 2010, and therefore are not evidence of diligent efforts by the county since that application was reinstated. And although the county did complete a phase 1 draft feasibility study of the proposal to divert American River water through the Freeport facility in 2011, the county has not begun work on any phase 2 of the study or a project-specific EIR. And based on the evidence submitted during the hearing, that's likely because of the relatively high per unit cost of water of the project. Most recently, in 2019, the Groundwater Sustainability Plan for the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Subbasin does not specifically identify any proposed project to divert American River water through the Freeport facility as one of the projects considered as a source of supply to reduce overdraft in the basin. Currently, the county faces a number of obstacles to further pursuit of its project. Many of these obstacles have been in place since the initiation of the application. The county currently has no access agreement for use of the Freeport facility as a point of diversion. The county has no project-specific planning for construction of the proposed project and related infrastructure, and no project-specific environmental impact report. The county also has offered no specific timeline in this proceeding for obtaining an access agreement or completing its project-specific planning. And the evidence indicates that the county's proposal to divert American River water is not at this time a priority project, in part because of the high estimated costs. The proposed order before you would cancel and in the alternative deny the application, but would do so without prejudice, as I've mentioned. The county would have the opportunity to file a new application for the same or a modified project when it is in a position to pursue that new application with diligence. During the hearing, the county raised the Watershed Protection Act as one of the bases for its claim to American River water, and the county would still be able to seek priority under the act for any new application to appropriate American River water. And the county may also benefit from filing a new application in this instance because it would have the opportunity to seek additional sources of supply for a diversion at the Freeport facility, namely Sacramento River water, which is not currently a source included in application 29657. The county raised a number of comments on the draft proposed order, which the AHO addressed in Attachment A. The first of these comments was the county's claim that it has shown good cause for the board to allow additional time for the county to submit the requested information necessary to support the application. The proposed order responds by noting the long history of 30 years over which the county has failed to provide really basic information necessary to support its application, such as project-specific planning and evidence of access to the proposed point of diversion. The county has also failed to demonstrate during the hearing that it has any immediate intent to proceed with project-specific planning. In fact, the evidence submitted by the county showed that several more years would likely pass before the county will decide whether the project is financially feasible and is worthy of future planning efforts. The county also objects that it has been promised access to American River supplies and that changes in the project over time have increased the complexity and cost of the projects, which justify a time extension. The proposed order responds by emphasizing that the diligence requirement to maintain a water right application applies to all applicants, regardless of reliance or assumptions by the applicant about access to the proposed supply. Ultimately, the county is responsible for diligently pursuing its own project. Although complex projects certainly may justify more time to submit information and complete necessary planning, complexity does not excuse the requirement of diligent forward progress by the applicant. The law ultimately prohibits an applicant from reserving water supplies without an immediate intent to pursue its project. Finally, the county objects that application 29657 is protected under the Watershed Protection Act and the county's need for additional water supplies to address critical overdraft of the groundwater basin justify an extension of time. The proposed order again notes that the diligence requirement is not contingent upon need, and applications that qualify for priority under the Watershed Protection Act are not accepted from the diligence requirement. Again, the proposed order would cancel application 29657 without prejudice, so the county would retain its right to file a new application if it determines that the project is financially feasible and it is prepared to diligently pursue it. For these reasons, the AHO recommends that the board adopt the proposed order in its entirety pursuant to Water Code Section 1114, Subdivision C2A. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board members may have at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kenzie. Really appreciate the thoroughness of the order and the justification and time and work. This continue to be reminded, especially at this time when water rights and its administration is so critical. We're fortunate for the AHO as a resource to be able to work through issues and applications in ways which we haven't had the resource to do before. So I just appreciate the good work and thoroughness of it. I'm supportive. I don't currently have any questions, but we do have a number of commenters, which I would like to hear generally. But looking to other board members at this moment, if there are any questions or anything you'd like to flag.
I do have some comments, Chair.
Yes, please, board member.
And so this one for me, so first of all, I would like to, just thank staff, for all their time, just working, through the years, not just, on this order here in particular. And so I know a lot of time and effort has gone, into this. And so I just want to just flag for me, this one here, while I am supportive, this one, it has been a difficult one for me. I think that, so as was highlighted, on slide 14, just the diligence. So when I look at this and I see, San Joaquin County, which serves many disadvantaged communities, And we look at, diligence and, the San Joaquin County and their ability to diligently pursue a water right and for projects. I see that as being different than a more advantaged community. And so, when just looking at that in more, I say more isolation, but just looking at that in particular, that's where it really gets difficult for me. And so, so I guess, where my ask is, I believe that this is an example of a project where when we have an application from a county or a community that serves, a disadvantaged area, where we have an opportunity, where staff have an opportunity to look at ways to help that community to process it, where, how can we provide technical assistance and to help them to understand the water right process, what we are looking for, and with diligently pursuing an application. Is there a way that we can help them with technical assistance, with helping them to understand the process, and the just what types of assistance can we offer and how can we do so? Because I just see just us going status quo and just sending the same type of letter or the same type of information that we would send to a more affluent community. I see that we just have some inequities there. And so for just, again, this one here is a really difficult one for me, just with looking at it from that lens. So I just want to highlight that.
Thank you, board member. I appreciate that perspective and agree that engagement in the water rights process isn't always an easy one, and that we should be better prepared to be able to provide technical assistance and resources. I'm not sure if San Joaquin County has, in the process of their application, asked for similar, but I think we might be able to have an opportunity to have some dialogue with folks on it. So thank you, board member. Let's go ahead and get to commenters unless there is anything further from fellow board colleagues. And I think here on the scroll, we have Barbara Brenner in person, and would call her up first. Good morning, good morning. Thank you. Oh, I think you need to still turn on the mic. Sorry, apologies.
There we go. Can you hear me better now?
And good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Again, good morning, board chair and fellow board members. I'm Barbara Brenner, special counsel to the County of San Joaquin. And I just want to thank the administrative hearing officer for the process and the professional manner in which it was undertaken. It was, I think, very thorough and well done. So I just wanted to say that. But on behalf of the county, we do respectfully disagree with the findings that were made by the county or by the administrative hearing officer and presented to you today. Specifically, I want to bring your attention to the extensive history of this application. I'm not going to go through the details. They're quite lengthy, the history of this application, but just remind the board members that how the county got here. The county was basically forced by the Bureau of Reclamation and this board to file on the American River. It was denied other efforts that would have been easier, less costly, and less effort with others to initiate and implement. And as a result of those former decisions, which are outlined in detail in our submittals, both at the hearing as well as in response to the proposed order, as a result of those efforts by the state and federal agencies, the county ended up at the Freeport facility. And it is true, it's more expensive, but more, in addition to being more costly in order to obtain the water and put it to use in the county area, it also has required a lot more collaborative efforts. And those collaborative efforts, as you know, take a lot of time. And the county has been pursuing those collaborative efforts and has been hamstrung again by some other regulatory provisions. During this long process, we have new regulations that have come in play and required efforts in that regard. We have the integrated regional water management planning that came upon the county and other agencies that are trying to implement water supply projects. So we have that requirement that came into play at some point in this process. And most recently, we have the groundwater sustainability management that we need to comply with. That has been a huge effort in collaboration, and the county is a large area. It's working with many, many agencies to come up with the groundwater sustainability plan that was submitted to the Department of Resources. That plan does include a project. It's not specific as indicated by the administrative hearing officer, but it does rely on this application, and it does rely on diversions from the American River in some of its projects in order to sustain the groundwater in the San Joaquin County. So it is not directly correct to say that there's no reliance on this application in the groundwater sustainability plan. There is reliance on this application. Most recently, the county engaged with East Bay Mud and others to develop the DREAM project. That's a conjunctive use project, pilot project, that takes years to first negotiate and coordinate. It has gone through the process of putting water in the ground. It is now at the stage of taking water out of the ground. That was a pilot project specifically to see what angles, what efforts could be done, and what opportunities there are for this particular water. In other words, we went through a pilot project with East Bay Mud to help establish the best avenue to use water from application 29657. So that was a very real effort on the part of the county, and a collaborative effort that took many years through the COVID process, through the groundwater sustainability planning process, that is now just at the stage of taking water out for the first time to determine the impacts of all that. Those efforts were necessary in order to move forward to the next step, which the administrative hearing officer has pointed out, that is a project-specific environmental impact report. Until those other efforts occurred, the county was not in a position to make a decision one way or another on how to move forward with this particular application. It is now just getting to that point of evaluating all those alternatives, working with the people within the county, the other agencies within the county, to develop a cooperative, collaborative partnership that can now take a strong look at application 29657 and see which is the most feasible avenue for this water supply and help to sustain the groundwater within the county that is in severe overdraft. Enormous amount of time and energy, including money, has been put into this project or into this application in an effort to develop the right alternative projects. Now, that effort will be thrown out the window if the board decides to adopt the administrative hearing or hearing officer's proposed order. To start all over would be very costly to the county. They've paid the annual fees necessary to keep this application alive. To just throw it out the window after all these efforts would result in a significant decline in the county's effort in that regard. And it would set them back financially as well as in implementation efforts and planning efforts. It's not the same to file an application today. It'll come with a lot higher costs and a lot more, just an enormous amount of direct collaboration before you can even get in front of into the door. The requirements today are much more stringent than they were, and it would be a backward step for the county to have to start all over in that regard. We've gone forward, we've kept it alive, we've made significant efforts over the years. We were forced down this road by state and federal regulations and decisions. And I think it's a unique circumstance. And I agree that it doesn't appear that there's been due diligence, but under this particular circumstance, which are quite unique, I think it deserves another shot and an opportunity to be pursued. I appreciate your time and effort. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Brenner. I appreciate your comments here. I guess question would be, and I don't know, Ms. Kenzie, you're most appropriate to respond, but what is it a starting over here if we are to put aside the application and San Joaquin would have to refile? How much of it, is it of a reset, if you will, in your judgment of their process and their time here before the board?
And I'll respond just from my perspective, and certainly Ms. Brenner may have other comments on this. From my perspective, I don't see this as by any means throwing out the window of the efforts that have been undertaken so far. I think this planning process that the county has been pursuing a number of different water supply projects, as reflected in the groundwater sustainability plan and in other planning documents, show that the county is making efforts to secure cost-effective water supply for its residents and the entities that use water within the county. And it may be with further planning and further feasibility assessment that this project is one that does make sense. As I've discussed during the presentation, there are a number of additional steps, some of them challenging, that the county will have to undertake, and one big one being to secure access to the Freeport facility. That is a significant unknown, and given that the owners of that facility are a third party, so those negotiations would need to take place to secure some kind of access, and that access may incur additional costs. I did want to comment for the board's information, because I thought it might be just relevant to your understanding, and I came prepared with it today, that according to the board's records, the division's records, the initial filing fee by the county in 1990 was $40,430 to file the application. Between 2006 and 2022, the county has paid $103,427 to maintain the application and annual fees. The most recent annual fee from 2021 to 2022 was about $17,000. So that's the current situation. And if the county were to refile the application for the face value that is currently within the fourth amended application, that would come with the maximum application filing fee of approximately $580,000. So that is a factor here, and I think maybe one that Ms. Brenner is referring to. Of course, and if I may go back to Ms. Board Member Morgan's comments, those filing fees are a matter that is within the control of the board. It's a factor that could be considered here, and there may be other assistance that the board can provide in moving this project forward. But from my perspective, the maintaining this application will not in itself help this project move towards a decision point or make progress towards an actual wet water supply. There are other efforts that need to be made in order to do that. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Ms. Kenzie, and here, I appreciate the perspective of the county and truly here wanting to maintain the application, but I think it's not a full reset, right? I mean, and here I know that it can feel a hit perhaps to momentum, but I can't help but feel a more refined application might actually help get through and more quickly be able to go through the board process, as opposed to pending for such a long time, which itself has a cost, we know, to the county. I'd be interested in understanding the flexibility that we could have for the fee that may be associated when the county's ready to come back, if we are to move forward today with an application. And would just kind of flag that as a matter of again, some equity here, knowing that the financial hit potentially, and I'd want to, as we hear from further commenters, just better understand what the difference is, how it is a bit more onerous now in their application as opposed to what it was prior. And I think, again, some of that is in our attempt to be able to have applications that actually move through our process, as opposed to kind of sit there, which we have a lot of in the water rights space. So it's kind of balancing those two desires here. So thank you, Ms. Brenner. Anything further I'd like to add?
No, I have nothing further. Mr. Zadar is on the web, and he'll have further comments on behalf of the county. I appreciate the opportunity to be heard.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Okay, let's next go to, I think we have here on the scroll, which I'll try to keep better too, so that everyone's prepared on who's coming up next. But we have Clyde McDonald, who will be followed by Matthew Zadar.
Good morning, board members. My name is Clyde McDonald. I'm representing Save the American River Association. 50 years ago, the founders of Save the American River Association, known as SWRCB, conceived of the idea of the American River Parkway, which runs through urban Sacramento. Today, the Parkway is one of the best urban parkways in the nation, attracting 8 million visitors per year, more than Yosemite. It's a wild and scenic river, both state and federal. In 1990, SWRCB protested the original San Joaquin application because it would have reduced flows in the lower American River. In the 32 years since, San Joaquin has never contacted us to resolve our protest. SWRCB is a member of the Sacramento Water Forum, which was created by the City of Sacramento and the County of Sacramento in 1993. The Water Forum has become the regional water planning entity for the 3-county area, Sacramento, Placer, and El Dorado regions, with 50 organizations as members. San Joaquin has never met with the Water Forum. I really think in today's environment where the people in one watershed want to go into another watershed, they have a duty and obligation, or at least should have, to talk to the people who live in the area where they want to get the water. It's been 32 years. San Joaquin has not done that. I think if we look at what would have happened last year, had San Joaquin taken its water, Sacramento probably would be in a water crisis because San Joaquin would take its water early in the year, and then the drought kind of blew up on us, and Folsom ended up with something around 200,000 acre feet. Sacramento would be an absolute water crisis. San Joaquin never addressed these kinds of issues. These are really important. The Water Forum has probably spent $30 million trying to develop protections for the lower American River to meet the water supply of the Sacramento area. We've worked with the Bureau, we have temperature models, doing all of these things, trying to do that. San Joaquin has not engaged in what has happened in the Sacramento area. They've looked at their own area, but they have not looked at the Sacramento area. SWRCB, during this process, given that they hadn't talked to us, SWRCB also asked the other protestants whether San Joaquin had contacted them to work out their protests. And we asked the ones that were not involved in San Joaquin County, and we could only find one that had been contacted by San Joaquin, and that was Sacramento County Water Agency. And they reported that they had 1 or 2 meetings with them, but nothing was actually resolved by that. The 11 protests, we asked the 11 protestants also signed a letter. I'm sorry, I'm missing a point. We asked the other protestants of whether they had been contacted with San Joaquin, and only one said that they had been. 11 of the protestants signed a joint letter to the AHO supporting cancellation of the San Joaquin application, and I'd just like to read their names. State Water Contractors, Kern County Water Agency, San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority, Westlands Water District, Contra Costa Water District, City of Sacramento, Sacramento County Water Agency, San Juan Water District, Glen Colusa Irrigation District, Friends of the River, and Save the American River Association. And just one other point, San Joaquin County has claimed that they are eligible to claim protection under the Watershed Protection Act, 11460, which requires an entity to be immediately adjacent to the watershed. And San Joaquin is not immediately adjacent to the American River watershed. There's the Cosumnes watershed in between. Anyway, I would encourage the board to adopt the staff recommendation to cancel the application. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your time today and comments, Mr. McDonald. Next, I'd like to call up Matthew Zidar, followed by Chris Schutz. Good morning.
Greetings. I appreciate the chance to be in front of you today and looking forward to kind of making our case a little bit different way. I'm not the legal expert, but I think I have a good sense of justice. I feel like a boxer, and we're here in like the 10th round, and we probably lost in the fifth round just on points, you know, as we're going up against some pretty big interests here. I'm hoping to finish the fight. Maybe there's one punch that could buy us some time into other rounds or help us win the battle. There is a history, and it's well presented in my testimony and the prior records and all the other hearings as summarized by Barb. And it points out that there's been some, what I would say, almost injustice. And I think there's a big difference between legal and just. I think the AHO did a great job making a legal case, but I'm not sure it's one that's based on justice. Perfectly crafted, well laid out, you know, but I'm not sure the decision you would make in denial would be just, given the history. Mr. McDonald says that people who want to go into another watershed, we didn't want to go into another watershed. The Bureau and the State Board pushed us into the American River watershed and designated us as having watershed of origin claims. Now this idea of a watershed of origin, or you know, that it would be, we don't have a reservation for the water. To me, I think that's what watershed of origin was about, to say there is a reservation of water for your future needs. And we were designated that way because we were basically kicked off of our local streams, both the Stanislaus and the Mokelumne, by actions of the State Board in the past and the desires of the Bureau of Reclamation to get people to subscribe to the Auburn Dam and take water down the Folsom South Canal, which subsequently were denied to us. So again, I'd point you, if you had a chance to read the testimony and the history, I won't beat it up too much, you know, but I will say it was legal, but was it just in 1956 when the State Board in decision 858 denied our access to the rivers, as I mentioned, and theoretically they corrected it later by saying, oh, you're watershed of origin, so you are in the American River watershed as a matter of water supply planning. That was a State Board designation because of the push off of our rivers. Later on, Mokelumne and Stanislaus were apportioned to interests outside the county, saying that the American River was thought to be cheaper and more dependable than the Mokelumne River. That's obviously proven not to be true. Was it just when in 1958, decision 893, the county and interest filed for water rights to the American River and were denied these permits with a seniority of 1958 at the request of the Bureau, which later got the water rights assigned by the State Board. It was legal, but was it justice when the State Board approved the water rights permits to the Bureau, decision 1356, determining San Joaquin County could be equally served by the contracts with the federal government. And when the State Board reiterated San Joaquin County would be assured access to the American River, further confirming the premise that the county's access to the American River was based on Watershed Protection Act. That is a reservation for future needs. Gosh, it's no mystery to me that all the exporters are happy to see us get kicked off the American River as well, especially given the nature of the State Board's challenging task to come up with the Bay Delta plan and updates. Was it just when in 1967 and 71, when the federal contracts with the Bureau were negotiated, approved by the USBR locally, and then denied based on a lot of politics in Washington? It was legal, but was it just when in 1973, the Stanislaus was apportioned under D 1422 to the Bureau, saying that the portions of San Joaquin County north of the Calaveras would be best served by the Folsom South Canal and the American River? This was later affirmed in 1981 when the Secretary of Interior noted that the provisions of the only a small amount of Stanislaus and San Joaquin County could accept the water, or would accept the water provided from the American River through the Folsom South Canal? Was it just when we were denied access to the Folsom South Canal and moved to a point of diversion to Freeport Water Project, an unaffordable and not cost-effective solution? We could not pay for that water. We could not afford it. We tried. We looked every way. There was conversations, and the costs just were not tenable for our, yes, disadvantaged county. You're going to be seeing future decisions. I ask you to remember these facts when you, in the future, are asked to apportion the water to others, which you may deny us today. A Sacramento editorial that maybe you all saw called our efforts a water grab. The people behind that and other heavyweight boxers that we're up against, to use my ring analogy, on the American River are powerful interests. They will seek to develop the water that could be denied us today. These are the true water grabbers, not us. We got kicked off of our river, and they seek to paint their names on these drops for future development and growth. We could really impact our $3 billion ag industry and our disadvantaged communities from realizing the opportunities which theoretically come from a reservation of water under watershed protection statutes, especially when we have been denied access to our own rivers. They'll be coming back to you. That is the real water grab for the water that you could be denying us today. There is an agenda. They mentioned the water forum, Sac County, El Dorado County, Placer, all deep pockets entities. You can bet that this will be a reset if we have to go back and file for a new water right with $600,000, because it's tough to find that, especially that money being redirected from what could be engineering and getting through the environmental process and all the work necessary to maybe amend this permit. You know, I say amend, don't deny. Give us a second chance at a second chance. They will be back. Those interests will be back to the American River, you know, in the future, if the recommendation of the AHO is accepted. Is it just? Is it legal? That later point about legality is probably for another venue. We ask the state board to use its powers and authorities to back up your prior decisions. Stick with the principles of watershed of origin and your prior decisions and commitments, and make a just decision. So what is our ask? Excuse me. The 2012 water availability analysis demonstrated that there is wet year water and that we can use with no impacts to existing beneficial users, fisheries resources, or changes to the operation of Folsom. Our prior environmental work and preliminary work shows that, and it's specious and false to say that we would have impacted Sacramento's water supply in this drought year and created a big disaster. That's bunk. We are looking at wet year water from December to June, not years when it's dry, not years when it's unavailable. We're talking about contemporary, modern, conjunctive use practices, whether that's flood-mar or FIRA-mar operations, combined with a water supply portfolio that looks at Mokelumne, American, Calaveras, Stanislaus, to resolve our critical overdraft issues. You would be pulling one of our very important options in us achieving sustainability. And this is totally contrary to SGMA and what the state board stands for. This is in the public interest. That has not changed. The state board affirmed that there is a significant public interest in supporting efforts of San Joaquin County to obtain adequate water supplies. By denial, that is not demonstration of your recognition of significant public interest. That watershed status of origin shouldn't be put on a clock. It should be recognized as a reservation, especially after denying us access to all the other local supplies. What do we ask for? We ask for time. And by my numbers, and I'll have to go back and look it up, I believed we had spent over $300K in the last 10 years to maintain this right. That has to be good for something. And I agree, and I appreciate Ms. Morgan's statement that we need technical assistance. We need support. Gosh, I'd love to have a refund of the fees we have put into it. But I would really prefer that we just keep this alive, because it would be a restart to pull this, give us a much lesser seniority on our claim, and it would kick the props out from under us and make us redirect a lot of money to other things that are not productive in getting us developing water supplies. We're in a critical state of overdraft. We have a GSP. We have projects that we've recognized in there as opportunities to take and put that American River water to beneficial use. It is recognized in American River Project 20 in that GSP. We need about 80K acre feet to be sustainable. I would love to amend our permits, recognize the seniority and the people we have talked to at Sac County and El Dorado recognize their senior water rights and look to take 20 to 30,000 acre feet of wet year water through conjunctive use, spreading operations, direct recharge, and the things that will use the 1 to 2 million acre feet of available groundwater storage. You're removing options from our planning process that have always been on the table for us. We have believed we've pursued things diligently. I mean, 2014, when Sigma got started, we were so wrapped around the axle of getting the GSP together and continue to update our IRWMP so we could get funds in here for our severely and our disadvantaged communities. We need to create a water supply portfolio that's resilient, reliable, and will help sustain us through the types of drought we are experiencing now without causing harm to anybody else or changing the operation of Folsom Reservoir. And we need all of this to respond to climate change. You're removing one of our critical alternatives and essentially hobbling us, tying one arm behind the back in the boxing matches that we do have to be in to plan our future. State Board has an opportunity to intervene and support supply solutions here without forcing cutbacks to demand, impacts to the economy, loss of jobs, and everything else. We ask for a second chance. We have commitments from the city of Stockton and Cal Water, as noted in letters from them to the AHO, to pursue this right and potentially even look at alternative sources of diversion, like Stockton's Delta diversion, like we can make that work. How about Folsom South Canal, which coincidentally the Consumnes GSP has in their plan to take the wet year water we're talking about using it, move it down Folsom South Canal, which we have been denied access to help balance their supply in the southern part of the county. And we don't want to stand in the way of their solutions, but not when their solutions is exactly what we've been proposing for 30 years and have been denied. So that's a paper water solution in their Consumnes GSP to achieve sustainability. We'd ask for the same courtesy. Let us use Folsom South Canal more cost effectively, get that water in the northern part of our county, and we can move forward. We asked for the opportunity to update the water availability analysis. And we did talk to SAC and El Dorado saying that's the first step, is making sure that we are consistent with any updates. We were consistent with ours in 2012 with the anadromous fisheries as we understood at the time. We know that there's been work on the American River that we'd have to look at again. But we had a big right, a lot higher than the 2030K that I think we should be reserved under a senior priority. So we don't have to restart. And we asked for that opportunity to work with people to update that WA. And one of the reasons we haven't been actively involved
Mr. Zadar, I apologize. I don't like to interrupt folks, but I do have to ask you to start to wrap it up. It's been a bit of time now.
That's the ask. So my concluding remarks really are, chronic and systematic overdraft provides good cause, which is an important point for the board to consider. The state board itself declared the American River water in use in San Joaquin County in the public interest. Watershed of origin is a reservation for future needs, and I think we should back up that principle for a developing county. Pursuing future filing will put us one down with one hand behind our back, unable to box with the heavyweights on the American River that want us gone, whether it's exporters or the Placer, SAC, or El Dorado interests. It'd be like kickboxing with Gandhi with us if we have to restart this thing over for 580,000 filing, and then all the protest resolution, and all the fights that'll go on. We showed in our water availability analysis that nobody beat up that badly, that there was water available without harm to existing users. Our IRWMP, ICP show that we have a way to put the water to use. We want to stand by the watershed of origin. We felt like we've done due diligence and tried really hard with the resources available. And Barb outlined a bunch of projects that could help us achieve sustainability and put this water to beneficial use. So we ask you to not deny this permit, ask your staff to negotiate a potential amendment and look at alternatives. And like I say, we're willing to recognize other seniorities of protested parties and drop the amount that we're seeking to tie that into our water supply plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zadar. I appreciate your points and your time and engagement. I know this is not an uncomplicated issue, nor it's a longstanding issue. And there's a lot of tension and complexity, certainly between the projects and others within the watershed. But know that we're here to continue to support the county, no matter how the board moves today. So I just appreciate your good points. I guess my question, and maybe, I don't know if you can easily answer, Ms. Kenzie, would just be, what is the impact on priority? if the board were to move forward today? Where does that put potential, and would really depend on when an application makes its way before the board again, but trying to quantify what sort of hit that would necessarily look like.
Thank you, Chair Esquivel. Because there's limited information in the record on this issue, there is not a definitive answer to this, although the attachment A in the proposed order does mention that it doesn't appear that a difference in the priority date of 1990 to 2022 or later would have a significant impact on water availability, particularly as Mr. Zaidar described the project, as I understand it from the county, although not necessarily entirely captured in the fourth amended application, but as the county described the project during the hearing, that it would be a proposal to divert high flows in wet or above average conditions. I would also say that because the county is making this Watershed Protection Act claim without opining on whether or not that applies to the application, because that wasn't before the AHO at this time, if it were to apply that to American River water as a source, it would seem to apply equally to the 1990 application as to a more current or future application. So those were two factors that I did mention and are reflected in the proposed order in attachment A.
Really appreciate that, Ms. Kenzie. Thank you. Vice Chair, did you have a question?
Well, I was going to wait for the commenters, but since we're talking here about the watershed of origin issue, just reading through, I think it was in attachment A, there was provision that nothing in the Watershed Protection Act excuses an applicant from the due diligence requirement. And so just want to hear more from you about that statement.
Thank you, Board Member Adamo. You're absolutely correct. And the proposed order discusses this, that the Watershed Protection Act, although it provides priority status for certain areas of use over diversions for the projects, the Act contemplates, as I understand it, that the application and permitting process would be in accordance with the other rules under the Water Code, and that there are not exceptions to either the diligence or any other requirements for an application or pursuit of an application and then permitting to licensing. So although the Watershed Protection Act applies to provide a priority to that right in practice, it does not grant an exception from diligence requirements that must be undertaken by the applicant to pursue and maintain that right.
And then getting to the issue of fairness. So for me, in reading through the order, and I just really appreciate the thoughtfulness that and really going through the 30-year plus history. So for me, a very important piece of information has just been the history of failure to respond. And I look at, the many water rights applications that we have before us and sort of the backlog, and really concerned about a situation where, regardless of need, that we need to be able to work effectively and efficiently. But hearing Mr. Zaidar's comments about good cause and the public interest, I just want to take a little bit of time here to hear a little bit more information about what exactly was, because as I read through the order, I didn't pay maybe as much attention to the specific information. So there might be a situation where the information just wasn't available. But what sort of information has been requested through time? And was there a type of response, maybe an incomplete response, or just no response?
Thank you. I will answer that as best I can. There are more details in the proposed order, but I think several points come to mind. As I laid out, I think on one of the slides, and then also in the proposed order, There were a number of requests over the 20 years before the division initially canceled the application in 2010. Those requests for information included requests for information about elements of the project, such as, of course, water availability, access to the proposed points of diversion. Now, those proposed points of diversion have changed over time. In 2003, the proposed points changed to be exclusively the Freeport facility. But my understanding is that the county did not submit information about access to the proposed points of diversion either before or after the change in 2003, in part because the county does not have an agreement to access the Freeport facility. Other information that was requested was information about Section 7 consultation and impacts to biological resources. My understanding is that information has not been submitted in any form. Of course, no project-specific draft EIR has been completed, nor a final EIR. That would need to be done, and that has not been submitted, nor have any efforts. I should say, I don't want to say any efforts. No specific plan to put together a project-specific EIR has been in place or has been pursued. Most recently, in 2014, I believe the county did provide some water availability information and has done that based on a commitment to use South Fork American River water as the sole source under the application. So the county did provide some water availability information, although the division had additional questions. So I don't know that I believe according to the records that we have in the administrative record, more information would be needed on water availability to complete this process. But my understanding is that water availability information is essentially the only information requested in the 18 different categories of information that the division identified in its 2011 letter that the county has fully responded to at this time.
Thank you both. Looking to see if there's anything from fellow board colleagues. And then let's move on to further commenters. Next, we have Chris Schutz, who will be followed by Carissa Beecham.
Good morning. It still is morning. Board members, Chair Esquivel, Vice Chair Diadamo, and board members. Chris Schutz for the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance. I'm going to keep my comments brief. It's really hard to respond to Mr. Zadar's sort of re-litigation of the entire record. I'd like to point out, first of all, that my organization is not a heavyweight in the sense that Mr. Zadar claimed. We're simply a public interest, non-governmental organization that's trying to defend the integrity of the water rights process in this case. I'd like to commend Ms. Kenzie for her thorough analysis. And I'd like to point out, in contrast to Mr. Zadar's suggestion, that it's not just a legal analysis that just goes by the letter of the law. It also takes into account extensive factual issues that have come up in this process. Slide 17, I believe it was, in particular, discusses the obstacles to construction and use. The fact is that this is not even a high priority project for the county. It's not cost effective. There are other things that they've identified in their groundwater sustainability plan that are more cost effective and much farther on the way to getting going. Again, in contrast to Mr. Zadar, they have a pending application also stemming from 30 years ago for water from the McCollum River for high flows that would be immensely more cost effective for the county to put to use. I believe that the Joint Groundwater Sustainability Agency just adopted a plan to finance pursuit of that application. That makes, to me, a huge amount more sense than trying to export water from another watershed through facilities owned by somebody else at probably 4 or 5 times the cost, facilities which moreover they haven't received ability or authorization to use. Regarding the injustice kind of issue, in our brief, CSPA went through the claimed cases of how the water board had misdirected or misled or not followed through in its promises or requests, or however they're characterized by the county. And it was in my opinion, generous interpretation on the county's part of sort of dicta in various water rights orders that we document one by one and answer. And the injustice on the water rights level in any case is not founded. And if there's questions, I suggest that the water board review CSPA's closing brief. In summary, this one's really not close. It's been 30 years. There have been so many failures to perform. It's not a high priority project. It's not cost effective. There really hasn't been any significant effort to do any project specific activities. All the activities discussed are preconditions or programmatic issues or things like that. And it's in the best interest, not only in my opinion, of the water board to help defend the integrity of its process, but also in the best interest of the county to take this one off the list and move on to projects that are more economic and more likely to take place. And frankly, CSPA is willing and able to help the county navigate some of the issues that they may have with some of these projects. I've reached out a number of times over the last decade to try to advance some of those things and haven't gotten much of an affirmative answer. I request that the board cancel and or deny this permit. Let's finish it once and for all and move on to projects that are more likely to achieve the needs of the county. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schutz. Appreciate your time and engagement on this issue, and I know on others as well. Thanks for addressing the board. Next, I'd like to call up Carissa Beecham, who will be followed by Rebecca Ackroyd.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and board members. Carissa Beecham, outside counsel for San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority. A lot has been said this morning, so I will happily announce that we have no additional comments to add. If Ms. Ackroyd is not, I know she was going to be observing this morning, but if she's not on the line, she is not likely to have further comments either.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Ms. Ackroyd, is Ms. Ackroyd on the platform? Okay.
She is not.
Okay, thank you. Then let's move on to Dan Kelly, who will be followed by Brian Paulson. And rounding us out, I believe, will be Aaron Ferguson.
Board Member Esquivel and board members, thank you. Appreciate your time today. I want to maybe back up a little bit and make sure that everybody kind of puts this in context. There was a noticed hearing that happened. The Administrative Hearing Office held a hearing where there was extensive testimony and cross-examination on all of these issues, and certainly many of the issues that have been discussed today by the county. Access to Freeport, the application of this water right application to the DREAM project, and all of that was addressed in rather extensive briefing, and we think it was considered in a well-reasoned draft opinion by the hearing officer. The county's own testimony during those proceedings demonstrated that the county did not intend to diligently pursue this application, and I think that that's reflected in the proposed order. I think it's also important to realize that, as the hearing officer told you today, that the watershed of origin issue was not at issue at the hearing on this matter. It was not part of the notice to proceeding. It was not, there was no evidence about it at the hearing, and it was not briefed. And so that issue is not before the board today. It simply is a matter of whether or not the county has proceeded with diligence in pursuing this water right application. And so the board doesn't need to address at all the application of the watershed or area of origin statutes to the county's water supplies. And, you know, as the hearing officer said, the county is free at any time to submit another water right application. And if in fact the watershed of origin protections apply, then they would apply to that future application and not put the county to any disadvantage. So with that, I have no further comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Next, I'd like to call up Brian Paulson, and our last speaker will be Aaron Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Chair Esquivel. It's a pleasure to be in front of the board today. I echo the comments of Dan Kelly. I do want to just acknowledge, and by the way, I'm Brian Paulson. I am General Counsel for El Dorado Irrigation District. EID, as it's commonly called, is a protestant or in this application. And so that is the posture that we have assumed. I do want to acknowledge, working for a public water agency, myself, much like Mr. Zadar, I do want to commend him for his persuasive testimony today, as well as to acknowledge the work that he and his colleagues have put into the application over the years. Having said that, I echo the comments of Mr. Kelly just provided. And the only thing I would add to that is an acknowledgement that I think as a representative of a water agency, I feel compelled to make, and that is that if the statutes 1276 and 1335 and the diligence requirements of those statutes, as well as the code of regulation at issue here, are to mean anything, then I think it's important to cancel the application, as has been.
Apologies, Mr. Paulson. We lost you at the end of your comment there. And I'll just thank Mr. Paulson for his comments and acknowledgement of Mr. Zadar's points. I think we can have these conversations collegially for sure, and do appreciate his acknowledgement of others' comments. Next, then, we'll move on to Aaron Ferguson, who will be our last commenter.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and board members. Aaron Ferguson from Somac, Simmons & Dunn, appearing on behalf of Sacramento County Water Agency and Glen Colusa Irrigation District. Mr. Kelly did a nice job summarizing the concerns of most particular interest to SCWA and GCID, so I won't add any further comments. SCWA and GCID encourage you to adopt the proposed order. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Looking to my fellow board colleagues, any further discussion? And I want to again also acknowledge the good points that everyone has made, the good discussion that we've had, and the thoroughness of Ms. Kenzie and the Administrative Hearings Office. I think, again, there are themes of justice were brought up. I feel that the work that Ms. Kenzie is doing is not just legally valid, but also comes with a sense of justice as well. And here know that at least certainly from the chair, and I think I can speak for the rest of the board as well. We are here to continue to work with the county, and this doesn't remove this as an option for the county. I'm willing to also understand if the county pursues an application again, if the board is to act here, then how we can address maybe the fee issue on reapplication, knowing that it can very well be a significant departure from the original fee amount, and could be a disincentive for the county, knowing that there aren't just buckets of money lying around. But I think that we're here again to be partners, to provide technical assistance, and open to figuring out how we better help the county refine, understand what its project may be, and be successful for the board. But I think when it comes to this decision, I'm pretty comfortable that unfortunately the diligence hasn't been shown, and we do need to be able to be working through our water rights system and pending applications like this. And so I'm largely supportive. But looking at my fellow board colleagues, if they want to make further points, and want to acknowledge and thank Board Member Morgan for her strong points here and sharing her important perspective amongst this discussion.
Thank you, Chair Escobar. I think that was very well said. I don't really have anything further to add, but just want to make sure that the county realizes that we've taken this very seriously. The order is lengthy. It goes through the history. I very much, I didn't go in with an opinion one way or the other. I felt that it was an opportunity to better understand, first of all, the legal requirements of due diligence, the opportunity for good cause in order to request an extension. And I think that it was important in my decision-making anyway to stay focused on that, despite the fact that I want good things to happen in San Joaquin County, and really would have preferred a different result if the law allowed for that. But the record is very clear. I don't see a feasible plan, the lack of response in repeated requests for information, and not the showing of reasonable diligence. So I'm comfortable with the order, and I appreciate your comments, Chair Escobar, about extending, keeping the door open to having further conversations with San Joaquin County, and do appreciate that some of the supporters that weighed in their offers as well to collaborate and continue working with San Joaquin County.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
And with that,
we have one more board member,
I'm sorry. Okay.
Firestone, I think would like to say some things as well.
I'll echo the comments that were said, just to share kind of my thinking in this, which is consistent with the other board members. You know, I do think that equity and public interest is an equity within our public interest analysis as part of our application process needs to be built into that. And I think in particular, we've talked about technical assistance or the challenge of financing planning that often lower income communities need to seek out rather than being able to self-finance. That all adds a lot of time in terms of the planning process, and I think needs to be incorporated into our analysis of due diligence in terms of how things move forward. I think that was not something that was pursued or has been pursued or is being pursued actively with a specific project here. But I want to just acknowledge that as we think about and continue to process our applications going forward. I also think that the idea of public interest from the standpoint of prioritizing and allowing time for regional planning projects that do take time, whether it's GSPs or IRWMs, you know, these regional collaborative planning projects. To do that collaboration and regional planning takes more time. And I think as we look at, again, how we consider public interest in the application process, especially in the consideration around priority and due diligence, those are policy considerations we just need to be really cognizant and intentional about. I do agree. I think in this case, there isn't the due diligence, there isn't a project that is ready to move forward within our process and appropriate to move forward as an application at this point. You know, there isn't prejudice, so something can be submitted in the future. And I think that, as everyone has said, we are very open and welcome and will you know, look at what additional assistance we can provide to help make sure that you know, good regional projects that and that pursue the public interest and help particularly low-income communities and communities get to resiliency are able to move forward diligently within our process. So appreciate the time of everyone today. But I again also am supportive of the decision.
Thank you, board member, for the good points. Board member Morgan, anything further you'd like to say?
Yep, I don't have anything further. Board member Firestone summed it up well. I think just again, just in the future as we are looking at these, just to take into account just my ask for staff is just to take into account some of the other factors, especially with communities that disadvantaged communities and communities that serve low income families, so that we can just have that broader perspective, and where appropriate, we can have provide that technical assistance early on within a process. Here today, I am supportive and ready to make a motion if we're ready to do so.
Thank you, board member. I think we are.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Townsend, can you please call the roll call vote?
Certainly. Board member Morgan,
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo,
Aye.
Board member Firestone,
Aye.
Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. And the item is adopted. Appreciate everyone's engagement around this. And thank you again to board member Morgan. I think what I would like to see as some follow-up, and we can have further discussion, is just technical assistance is such a critical part of our drinking water work, our wastewater work. So much of the good work we're doing in up and down the state. Here, to my mind, as we continue to have additional resources in the water rights space, have really important discussions, similarly thinking about how we structure technical assistance in the water rights space, I think will be helpful. And what I feel fortunate for is the leadership of the administration, the legislature here for considering additional resources and providing them to the board to work within the water rights space. And so again, board member Morgan, you highlighting on the technical assistance side is really appreciated, and appreciate everyone's time today on the item. Thank you. So that wraps up item 5 then, and brings us to informational item number 6. We are at noon. I will note that given what we have left on the agenda, I'd like to go ahead and work our way through it, and then we'll just end at that point and be able to depart for lunch. So let's go ahead and move then to item number 6, which is a report on our wastewater arrearages program. Thank you again, Ms. Kinsey. Good afternoon. Your mic may not be on, sorry.
Check 1, 2.
Hey.
All right. Afternoon, Chair Esquivel and board members. Hope everyone is having a fine day so far. My name is Gergagan Chand. I am a water resource control engineer within the Division of Water Quality. And to my left is Julie Osborne, lead attorney on this project from the Office of Chief Counsel. And sitting to the far left is Karen Mogus, Deputy Director of the Division of Water Quality. And today we'll be providing a status update on the wastewater arrearages program. So next slide, please. So just as a quick recap, the purpose of the wastewater arrearages payment program is to provide financial assistance to those customers who were struggling to pay off their sewer bills during the COVID-19 pandemic billing relief period, which was from March 4th of 2020 to June 15th of 2021. The last time we were before this board, which was in mid-January of this year, this board adopted guidelines for the wastewater arrearages payment program. And those guidelines established the process and criteria that was going to be used for the administration of program funds. Since then, staff has successfully, one, developed an online application portal, two, outreach to public wastewater utilities and respective billing entities, three, reviewed and approved those applications, four, processed and mailed checks to approved applicants, and five, developed an online portal for approved applicants to report how program funds were utilized. And for each of those accomplishments, I'll discuss in the upcoming slides. Next slide. So speaking on outreach, part of the reason why we were able to successfully implement this program in record timing is due to the significant amount of outreach that was performed. Unlike with the water arrearages program, staff did not have a readily available data set of the universe of public sewer agencies in which that were responsible for billing individual customers. And that's partly due to the varying complex billing structures that exist within the world of wastewater. So as a result, in order to spread awareness of this program to as many entities and to as many people as possible, staff utilized a two-prong approach in terms of outreach, one that was specifically geared towards sewer utilities and billing entities, and the other one towards the general public. Next slide. So when it came to spreading awareness of the program to sewer utilities and billing entities, staff sent upwards of 1,800 postcards to a mix of public water and wastewater utilities, and sent email notifications to over 1,000 public entities that were involved in some way in the collection of or treatment or disposal of wastewater. We also leveraged the relationship that the regional water boards have with the regulated community to sort of establish a priority list of sewer utilities that staff would focus one-on-one outreach efforts with, primarily through phone calls. Many of these priority utilities were ones that may have been located within small or disadvantaged communities, or they may have had a history of non-compliance with their respective discharge permits and therefore warranted the additional outreach. We were also able to collaborate with many of the major sanitation agency and local government associations throughout the state. And I'll just name a few, such as the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, California Water Environment Association, Rural County Representatives of California, and the California Special Districts Association. And staff was able to distribute FAQ and fact sheet documents that were developed that detail the program so that those reference materials could be handed to member agencies to spread awareness. Next slide, please. When it came to the general public, staff developed a separate series of fact sheets and FAQ documents breaking down what the wastewater arrearages program is, as well as highlighting the customer's role and motivating or persuading their sewer billing entity to apply for program funds. A social media campaign was also launched on platforms such as Instagram, and a series of press releases were issued for public viewing. Staff also posted a weekly list of applications we received from sewer utilities and billing entities under the program so that members of the public can see if their utility had signed up and applied for funding. In the case that a utility had not applied for funding yet, the customer would then able to refer to our list and reach out to their billing entity, their sewer billing entity, so that they could apply for funding on the customer's behalf, particularly if there were existing arrearages. Finally, we were also able to provide resource materials to community-based organizations, such as the Community Water Center, ECR Communities for Environmental Justice, and Central California Environmental Justice Network, just to name a few, so that they could also share these reference materials to the communities that they assist and represent. Next slide, please. So diving into the final numbers, in total, there were 242 sewer utilities, a combination of sewer utilities and sewer billing entities that were approved to receive funding under this arrearages program for a grand total of $134,199,277.44. So this amount is inclusive of residential and commercial accounts that were in arrears, as well as administrative cost reimbursements that the utilities were allowed to claim per the adopted guidelines. As you can see from this bar chart, approximately 42% of the approved applicants were for funding requests under 50,000. Many of these requests were from sewer systems, small communities. And in total, about 89% of the total approved requests were for under 500,000. The one data point I'd like to bring out to attention is the one that to the far right that sticks out, and that was the only entity that applied for funding in excess of $10 million. And that was the Los Angeles Bureau of Sanitation, commonly referred to as Los Angeles Sanitation. And they were approved for 59 million, or approximately 44% of the total requested arrears funding approved under this program. Next slide, please. So here on this slide, you can see that the numbers are broken down a little bit further based on account type. Approximately 99% of the accounts that the sewer utilities or billing entities requested arrears funding for were for residential customer accounts, approximating 111.7 million. There were only 242 commercial accounts that had qualified arrears during the eligibility period. On this slide, you might see the total of 131 million on there. That is only a sum of the residential and commercial accounts and doesn't take into consideration the administrative cost reimbursements that were depicted in the grand total in the previous slide. Next slide, please. So moving forward to where staff is currently at with the implementation of this program. Since the close of the application period back on April 22nd, staff has developed an online reporting portal for entities to submit details on how those dispersed funds were utilized. And this portal went live last month on June 8th. So within the portal, approved applicants must report the number of customer accounts that were credited and the amount that they were credited with, and provide a detailed description of the administrative tasks that were performed. Per the adopted guidelines, sewer utilities have 6 months from the time that they received their arrears funding check from the State Water Board to submit these reporting requirements and to remit any unused funds back to the state. Checks were issued and distributed to approved applicants as early as March to as late as June 30th, depending on when the utilities application came through and was approved. And as a result, the final deadline to submit these reporting requirements for the utilities who have submitted applications could be as late as December of this year or up until January of next year. Next slide, please. And so while we're still receiving these reports from approved utilities and billing entities, just as a preliminary update, as of July 14th, staff has received reporting requirement submittals from 45 of the 242 approved utilities / billing entities. And out of these 45 submittals, 27 entities have agreed to remit a combined $412,000 back to the State Water Board in unused funds. The return of unused funds is from a mixture of publicly owned treatment works or POTWs, as well as cities or counties that act as the legal billing entity on behalf of these POTWs. So far, the largest return check that we have received is from the city of Clovis, which is agreeing to send $103,000 back to the state in unused funding. The primary reason why some entities are sending back money to the water boards is that because many of the customers have paid down their arrears debt since the time that the entities applied and were approved for funding, which could have been as early as March, till the time that the credits were finally applied to the customer accounts, which could have been anytime in June. So since these paid down accounts no longer qualify for funding, just because there's no more existing debt. Other reasons that the utilities have cited within the reports for returning back unused funds is that during the initial application phase, there might have been some duplicative accounts or typographical errors that may have occurred, and these were eventually found to be invalid. And finally, in the incoming months, staff plans to ramp up outreach efforts to the remaining utilities that have yet to submit their reports. And staff is intending to follow up either through email reminders or phone call conversations as necessary. Next slide, please. And so that was a quick summary of the list of accomplishments that staff has undergone while implementing this program. The next couple of slides, I'll go into a brief description of some of the findings, or I guess lessons learned that were identified while implementing this program. Next slide, please. So one of the challenges I alluded to earlier in our discussion are the varying complex billing structures that exist within the world of wastewater. So unlike with community water systems, there's not really a one-to-one relationship between the wastewater system and the final entity that bills for wastewater services. Specifically for wastewater, the State Water Board is also not equipped with the mandate to track the legal entity that bills for wastewater services, as the Water Board's primary responsibility is to regulate only the discharge that occurs from publicly owned treatment works or sanitary sewer systems, and not necessarily the entity who bills for such services. Additionally, we also found that many of the regulated POTWs are not the ones that bill their customers. You can have scenarios where there's one billing entity for multiple POTWs, and this was a system that we saw within Los Angeles Sanitation, or there's multiple billing entities for a single wastewater treatment plant, and that was the system that was found locally here with Sacramento Regional Sanitation. Next slide, please. And so another finding that staff identified that was, I guess, completely unintentional in nature was the potential windfall for property owners or landlords that they may have experienced under this program. Based on concerns staff received through emails and phone calls from the public, staff realized that many renters paid water and sewer charges directly to the property owner as part of their rent. This detail was not captured in both the State Water Board's water and wastewater arrearages program, as well as with other COVID-19 relief programs implemented by other governmental agencies, such as the ones with the California Department of Community Services and Development. So per statute, all these COVID-19 financial relief programs are based on the actual billed customer debt, which would often be under the property owner's name and not the tenant. As the result, property owners who had qualified arrearages were reimbursed under this program, but there's no way in guaranteeing or determining if those savings were later passed on to the end tenant. Next slide, please. And so finally, another challenge that staff encountered was related to the timing for eligible arrearages under the COVID-19 billing relief period. So although staff was able to stand up this program at record pace, the gap in time from the end of the COVID-19 billing eligibility period of June 15 of 2021 to the time that the wastewater application period opened in February 1st of 2022 to the period when checks were finally distributed and approved to entities as early as March and April was such that customers had already paid down their debt, and especially in cases where the sewer bills were tied to the customer's property taxes. We also ran into the scenario that if a customer did pay off some of their sewer debt during that time, the amount would be applied to the oldest existing debt, which would be the debt that existed during the eligibility period. So as a result, even if a customer has sewer debt after the eligibility period, it would no longer qualify and they can no longer take advantage for the funding under this program, despite doing their due diligence and paying down some of their debt. Next slide, please. And so that's basically a recap of some of the lessons learned that staff experienced under this program and a conclusion to the overall staff update on the wastewater arrearages payment program. Staff is now available to answer any questions that the board or members of the public may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just so incredibly impressed by this effort. Between the arrearages on the drinking water side and here on the wastewater side, being able here, I mean, it was just in this last year's budget here as we approach this fiscal, we now are done with the fiscal year. And to be able to have executed both of these programs within a year, to get the dollars out, for them to have hit accounts and are improving the affordability of these services for households and families is just really incredible. And so just thank you and all the entire team for doing something, and especially on the wastewater side, where drinking water, we have a lot more touch points, to your point, and a lot more data as well. And here in the wastewater, we've never done anything even similar to this. and really having to start it from scratch, if you will, is just so impressive but needed, because these affordability issues aren't going anywhere. And we know that we need to continue to understand how best to even deliver support and services to our communities. And here, what is not lost on me, I think, is how we were ever chasing that debt window, whether it was the data around how much debt was out there, or as we try to get dollars out, understanding that people pay their bills, people pay off their debts. And some of the challenges with the program was that very strict window of what debt was actually qualifying for this program. But the lessons learned, the information has been incredible to see, and just really thankful for a lot of, I know, long hours that folks put into this program, and it shows. I guess my one question would just be, I know on the drinking water side, we were able to kind of pull together a statistic that said, is something like 80% of Californians represented by systems were captured in that program, right? Had an application before us. Do we know how many of the systems potentially out there that could have come to the program did? How much of a reach, I guess, on the wastewater side we had with this program, knowing that on the drinking water side, it was about 80%, and which is incredible to be able to say 80% of Californians, if they had debt within that window, we're able to take advantage of this program. And just wondering if we have anything comparable at this point for the wastewater side.
Yeah, don't have that statistic readily available on me right now, but we can definitely provide that.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be great. Just to, again, get a sense of scale, because the number of systems here, the number of households, it's not insignificant.
I do want to temper expectations because
we don't have that data, right? It's not that easy. Right?
It's not that easy because of the issue of the complex billing and support system. We may not ever have exactly the number of who could have been available, because we don't know everyone that does the billing.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And again, to my first point, just it's a different animal on the wastewater side. We just don't have these sorts of things. So appreciate that. It may not be as easy to generate, but thank you. Board members, colleagues, questions, comments, and just again, incredibly impressed.
Yes, if I could, I would just like to thank all of the staff for their incredible work on this program. Staff from divisions of water quality, information technology, administrative services, financial assistance, and office of chief counsel. There were staff from across the, the water board that went in, that came together to form a team to make this all happen. So I just want to acknowledge all of the staff that, and I apologize if I left any out, that came together to, really to form a team to make this happen in such a short period of time, on top of all of, their everyday work. So just want to express my gratitude and recognize, this tremendous effort. Thank you all.
Hear, hear. Thank you, board member.
I'll add to that thanks and recognition that both of you have already said, and just incredibly impressed, and also grateful, and just recognizing the kind of problem solving that staff are doing on a very short time frame for something we've never done before. This is really unprecedented nationally, but certainly in our state, to do anything like this in terms of assistance for wastewater in particular. So there was a lot of learning, a lot of creative problem solving, as I said. Really appreciate you all pulling some of those big lessons learned out. An indication here of just that there's an ongoing need for low-income ratepayer assistance for both drinking water and wastewater. The COVID short time period isn't the only affordability challenge that that folks face in this state. And unlike other utilities where we have ongoing low-income ratepayer assistance programs, we don't have anything like that on a statewide basis, as we all know, for drinking water or wastewater. And so just really hoping that we as a state can be helping to develop programs like this and learn from the work we've done here to be able to navigate how those could be designed to reach folks most effectively. So thanks, everyone.
Completely agree. And thank you, board member. This is just an informational item, so no vote or action. Again, just thank you and look forward to what I know will be continued discussions around affordability, how we view and support our systems. And here it's exciting. You know, this is the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act this year, and access to sanitation is so easily overlooked. It's underground, it's out of sight, it's out of mind, but it is increasingly the affordability of it is challenged, the reinvestments we know we need to be making in the systems, and even the gaps in equity that just exist in the space. It's exciting to be able to have this program to be able to work in this space and for us to be able to develop better information to support our communities. So thank you again. Really appreciate this work.
And Chair, if I could make one final comment. As you noticed, the staff is still continuing to work on this, both on the wastewater and the drinking water. The less glamorous side is all the reporting that has to be done to document that the monies were spent in the proper way, and that we are protecting the monies of the state when we're doing this, and that's going to continue for the next almost 6 months. We haven't finished the reporting on the drinking water side, even though their checks went out at the beginning of this year, and we still have many months on the wastewater side. So staff will still be working on this for the foreseeable future.
Thank you for that. Really important to keep in mind. The work continues on for sure, and it's a good moment to acknowledge and celebrate, and thank though everyone for doing the continued work on the back end that does those really important things: protect public investment here and ensure there isn't fraud, waste, or abuse, and closing the loop. So I appreciate that perspective. Thank you again. That wraps up then informational item number 6 and brings us to the last couple of items, both the board member report and our executive director's report. Board members, any reports that anyone would like to begin delivering? I'm going to look at my schedule quick.
I can jump in while folks are looking. I was able, as Secretary Blumenfeld mentioned, able to go down to Calexico and El Centro and participate in a press conference around the New River Improvement Project and the funding, additional funding that has been brought in for cross-border pollution, and just the leadership of the city and local leadership to get resources for that project. That is something that has been in the works. It's a real environmental justice issue. It's, really incredibly contaminated water flowing just past houses in the city of Calexico. And, this is phase 1 of a project that has been in development for a really long time. So was fortunate to be able to meet with folks there, along with Cali PA, just understanding the city's challenges and trying to make sure that that project can move forward. We're just so close to being able to get that finally diverted from the community and get good water flowing down. So I am just really anxious to make sure we are doing everything we can to support that project moving forward. I know, as we said during that item, that Mr. Angel has been incredibly committed to that as part of the regional board, and then now after he's retired, and just continued leadership from the regional board down there as well. And I let's see, I had another one that now I'm blanking on. I think oh, I know. I was able to meet with these Mandela Fellows that were part of a fellowship program. It's young professionals from a number of sub-Saharan African countries that are in the US meeting with representatives on a variety of topics related to the environment. So I was able to meet with that group of really impressive folks. Was able to follow up with some of the ones that are really focused on water. And, just both the kind of learn about some of the similarities of we're all working around trying to figure out how to address cross binational and across countries water resources management, capture water, deal with dilapidated infrastructure, accessing rural communities, so many of the same things that we're dealing with, and I think opportunities to learn from. So just incredibly grateful that I could be part of that. And those were the two things I think I wanted to mention.
Fantastic. Thank you, board member. Other reports?
Yeah.
And yes, board member Morgan, please.
Hi, sorry. I'll just note that I have an upcoming tour to the Tijuana River area to learn about and see firsthand more about the cross-border issues that are happening there and the associated projects. And so I'm really looking forward to that tour. And so that's the only thing I have to report this time.
Great. Vice Chair, do you want to go?
I'm not finding one on my calendar, but I did attend RD 108's anniversary celebration, 100-year anniversary celebration, and that was just really cool. And I put on everyone's desk a little thumb drive that had a history of RD 108, and I've got mine over here for you right now. Anyway, it was great to get out and see folks, a good diverse group that was out there celebrating with them. And then last week, I sat in on the Delta Water Masters discussion that he hosted regarding Delta water issues, just seeking a dialogue of collaboration as we continue to be challenged with ongoing dry conditions. And Delta interests were there, as well as folks that rely on Delta water supplies. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll be quick. And it has been a month since we gathered, so there was quite a bit, but I'll cover it briefly. On June 15th and 17th, I was down in the LA region and did an event with the LA Department of Water and Power, along with the Cal Chamber, around conservation and the critical need to continue to conserve. It was not long at that point after, actually, I think Commissioner Touton made her remarks in DC just a few days prior to that. So it was good, and have been glad to see some early success here with, I think, early data showing, somewhere around 8.5% or so June conservation numbers. So anyway, that was a good event. And then on June 23rd, I was actually down in Menifee in Southern California with Eastern Municipal Water District and their Paris desalter. It was a groundbreaking, actually not groundbreaking, was a valve turning. It was a ribbon cutting, but it was more valve turning. But there, it was Proposition 1 bond dollars that funded that in part. It was about a $22.5 million grant from the state board that really allowed that to come to fruition. It's desal, but it's groundwater, it's brackish groundwater, and again, comes at a really important time when these investments from previous bonds and from ongoing state funds and federal funds are really coming at an important point where we're really creating these more local supplies, weaning ourselves off of uncertain imported supplies, and was really great to see the leadership of everyone coming together for that project. On the 28th, I gave the keynote at the top, or the welcome actually. Bitta Becker from Cal EPA gave the keynote at our Water Data Science Symposium. Really appreciate everyone, Greg Gearhart, his team, everyone's yearly, this was the 5th year I believe, of the symposium, and each year it keeps getting better. This year, we're also doing a water data challenge as part of it. And the science, the data, the passion around these challenges, and the opportunities to better leverage our decision making was obvious then. So I just really appreciated that. And then on the 30th, I was part of the Regional Water Authority's coffee chat. And then on July 7th, I was at my Colorado River, virtually attending the Colorado River Basin Salinity Control Advisory Council, which I am a member of the forum. And then would just note, on Monday, I was actually in San Francisco with the Silicon Valley leadership group talking about conservation, and really appreciate Cal Water sponsoring that event. Had a good discussion on Monday. So there's my quick and brief overview recap. That concludes board member reports and brings us to the executive director's report. Ms. Sobek, anything you'd like to highlight, say?
No, thanks. I submitted the report. Happy to talk about it now or at any other time, but I'm good. Thanks.
Always an incredible document, real complete compendium of all the ongoing things that the board is doing, and I just appreciate everyone's work around it in your submittal. But board members, anything to comment on the executive director's report?
I have a comment. It's actually maybe more related to board reports, but just that was able to hear from some of the NGOs related to Salton Sea and concerns around the Colorado River negotiations, and how that, in terms of immediate drought negotiations, and how that will almost certainly impact Salton Sea water flowing into the sea. So I do hope that we can, Chair Esquivel, we've already been fortunate to have the executive director for the Colorado board come, and just would be great to continue to have him soon and keep us in the loop on that. And also just to note, we, as we're looking at our continued processes around the Salton Sea work with the Natural Resources Agency, just to ensure that all of the planning takes into account the reality that we have now with just real significant drought and probably aridification within the Colorado River Basin, and what that means for any long range planning that's going on. So just wanted to pick up, I know, Chair, your leadership within this area and the purview within the salinity area, but obviously just as we're continuing within our role at the board, looking at how we can be following and supporting those really significant changes that are happening.
Definitely. Thank you, board member. I really appreciated that meeting with advocates, with folks like Mr. Michael Cohen, who have long been following issues on the sea, and appreciated that dialogue and discussion, and completely agree with you that we need to continue to just understand, play our important role in part. But here it is Chris Harris that we definitely would, and I've spoken to him about definitely coming back here soon, knowing that the pace and scale of the discussions are ongoing. And whether it's, in our context with the stipulated order, the QSA, there's these obvious spaces, but then there's also just, thematic issues that the board can help be part of and around on these discussions. And appreciate the leadership at Resources Agency and others. There's I think a good, to your point, opportunity and mix agency and others. There's I think a good, to your point, opportunity and mix to not repeat the if you will, some of the sins of the past when it comes to not appropriately accounting for what the impacts will be down at the sea. So thank you for your leadership in that too. And I think we'll have definitely an opportunity here to make sure the Colorado River Board, Mr. Harris and others come before the board and have good public dialogue around how we balance these incredible challenges in our watersheds. So thank you, board member. Really appreciate that flag. Anything further? Vice Chair, other board colleagues? And if not, then that concludes both the board member reports, executive director report, and today's meeting. We do have a meeting tomorrow where we will continue this. It doesn't conclude the meeting. We'll be in recess and we'll continue our meeting tomorrow and our agenda. Until then, thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9:30 and we'll pick up on our agenda. But today's portion of this meeting is done. And so we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.